The dust swirled red under the alien sun, coating the battlefield in a gritty film. John Johnson coughed, spitting out the grime as he stepped over the body of a fallen Iconian warrior, one of the wolf-like grunts, paralyzed from the waist down and left for dead. The dust devils danced across a landscape littered with the wreckage of war, twisted metal, shattered energy weapons, and the still forms of the fallen. The alien sun, a malevolent crimson eye in the sky, cast long, distorted shadows across the desolate scene. John coughed again, the red dust clinging to the back of his throat. His clothes, faded and patched, marked him as a farmer, his presence utterly out of place amidst the carnage. The fabric was worn thin, the color leached out by the harsh sun, nothing like the fatigues the soldiers wore. A memory flickered, rows of corn stalks swaying in the gentle breeze, the golden kernels plump and ripe under a kinder, yellow sun. The smell of rich earth filled his nostrils, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of blood and ozone that permeated the air now. He remembered the feel of the soil beneath his calloused hands, the satisfaction of a hard day's work bringing forth life. He knelt beside a wrecked transport, its hull breached and blackened, and rummaged through the debris. After a moment he straightened up, holding a discarded medical kit, its contents scattered but mostly intact. The Iconians, with their lupin features and fierce loyalty, had fought alongside the humans, but they'd lost this battle, and the victors, whoever they were, didn't take prisoners. They executed the wounded, a brutal efficiency that left no room for mercy. The Iconian warrior groaned, a low, guttural sound that cut through the silence. Her legs were twisted at an unnatural angle, the bones clearly broken. She was conscious, her eyes narrowed, watching him with a mixture of pain and defiance. He could see the rise and fall of her chest, shallow and ragged, each breath a testament to her will to survive. John crouched beside her, his face etched with concern. "Easy there," he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. He reached out a hand, intending to examine her injuries, but stopped short as she snarled, baring teeth that looked sharp enough to tear through steel. "Rakesh." She spat, the word guttural and harsh like rocks grinding together. Saliva flecked his cheek. He didn't understand the language, but the venom in her voice was unmistakable. Ignoring the insults, John carefully reached for her legs, his movements slow and deliberate. Spinal damage, he suspected. He needed to get her out of the sun, find some shade, some water. He managed to slip his hands beneath her shoulders and tried to lift her. She snarled again, louder this time, and snapped at his hand, her teeth narrowly missing his flesh. "Human filth," she snarled, the words carrying a weight of hatred. John grunted with effort, ignoring the pain radiating from his own aching muscles. He pulled a section of plasteel from the wreckage and fashioned a makeshift stretcher. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it was better than dragging her across the rough ground. He slid the plasteel beneath her, wincing as she cried out in pain. She spat in his face, the spittle hot and acrid against his skin. The gesture was primal, defiant. Her eyes burned into his, a mixture of pain, anger, and something else he couldn't quite decipher, something that made him think of a cornered animal, fighting for its life. Still snarling, she continued to try to bite him as he began pulling her away from the killing field. The stretcher wheels snagged on a jutting rock, nearly sending John sprawling. His muscles screamed in protest, each pull a fresh wave of agony washing over his back. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, his focus solely on the dilapidated farmhouse that shimmered in the heat haze ahead. Phoebe, strapped tightly to the stretcher, remained a snarling storm of defiance. Spittle flecked with Iconian curses flew from her lips as she strained against the restraints, her powerful upper body coiling and snapping like a cornered predator. The alien words were guttural, filled with a venom that needed no translation. The farmhouse loomed closer, a skeletal structure of weathered wood and patched metal. Boarded windows stared out like vacant eyes, and makeshift barricades of rusted farm equipment cluttered the yard. It was a sanctuary of sorts, born of necessity and desperation. John heaved the stretcher through the wide, doorless opening, the wheels bumping roughly over the threshold. Phoebe's head snapped back against the cot, a choked growl escaping her. Inside, the farmhouse was a single, large room, sparsely furnished and heavy with the scent of dust and decay. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the boarded windows, illuminating motes of dirt dancing in the air. A worn cot sat against one wall, its springs groaning under the slightest pressure. Makeshift defenses overturned tables, stacks of crates lined the perimeter, a testament to the constant threat that lurked outside. Ignoring Phoebe's continued protests, John wrestled the stretcher close to the cot and with a grunt of effort transferred her onto the worn mattress. Her body was rigid with tension, her eyes burning with a mixture of pain and fury. John knelt beside her, his face etched with weariness, and gently peeled back the crude field dressing covering her spinal injury. What he saw made his stomach clench. The jagged wound, already festering, was clearly the result of a high-energy weapon, the kind favored by the Zener mercenaries. The damage to her spinal column was extensive. His expression became even grimmer. He retrieved a dented metal basin and a canteen of lukewarm water from his pack. Soaking a scrap of cloth, he began to clean the wound, his touch surprisingly gentle despite his rough exterior. Phoebe tensed as the damp cloth touched her skin, a low growl rumbling in her chest. She lunged, teeth bared, aiming for his hand. John, anticipating the move, yanked his hand back just in time, a thin line of Iconian drool glistening on his glove. "Easy there, Wolf," he muttered, his voice permeated with exhaustion. "Just trying to help." He rummaged through his salvaged medical kit, his fingers brushing against a rusted clamp he'd once used for grafting fruit trees. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best he had. Carefully, he positioned the clamp to provide external support to her damaged spine, tightening it just enough to stabilize the area without causing further pain. Phoebe watched him, her golden eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps grudging curiosity, replacing the pure hatred in her gaze. Flashback. The acrid smell of burning metal and charred flesh filled John's nostrils. He knelt beside a shallow grave, the faces of his wife and children pale and lifeless in the flickering light of the burning farmhouse. The Zener raiders had come without warning, leaving nothing but ashes and despair. He shoveled the last clump of dirt onto the grave, his heart a cold, empty void. Back in the present, John retrieved a tube of nutrient paste from his pack. It wasn't appetizing, but it was sustenance. He squeezed a dollop onto his finger and offered it to Phoebe. "Food," he said simply, hoping she understood. Phoebe turned her head away, her lips curling back in a snarl. A low growl vibrated in her chest. She refused to meet his eyes. John sighed. He squeezed another dollop of the paste onto his own finger and ate it, swallowing hard. "See. Not poisoned." He placed a dented container of water within Phoebe's reach, then stood and walked towards a gaping hole in the wall where a window had once been. He began to nail salvaged planks of wood over the opening, the rhythmic hammering echoing through the silent farmhouse. Each strike was a small act of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The faint crackle of gunfire drifted in on the wind, distant but unmistakable. It was a constant reminder of the war that raged beyond the confines of his small sanctuary. John paused, hammer in mid-air, his head cocked, listening intently. A look of deep concern settled on his weathered face. John returned to the farmhouse, the bucket of water sloshing softly against his worn leather chaps. The air inside was thick with the metallic tang of blood and the sharper scent of alien antiseptic. Phoebe hadn't moved. She remained sprawled on the makeshift bed, her golden eyes narrowed, fixed on him with a glare that could curdle milk. He ignored it, setting the bucket down with a quiet thud. He soaked a strip of clean cloth in the water, wringing out the excess. "Gotta clean that up," he muttered, more to himself than to her. He crouched beside her, the damp cloth held gently in his calloused hand. He reached for her face. Phoebe's muscles tensed, every fiber in her powerful upper body coiling like a spring. But she didn't lash out. Not yet. He dabbed at the dried blood caked around her snout, the grime that clung to the fur around her eyes. Beneath the dirt and dried blood, her features were sharper, more defined than he'd initially realized. Her fur was a patchwork of golds and browns, subtly iridescent in the dim light. As he cleaned her forehead, he noticed it, a small, intricate tattoo etched into her skin just above her right eye. It was a complex design of interlocking geometric shapes, pulsing faintly with a bioluminescent blue, a mark of rank, a symbol of her pack. Phoebe spat. The glob of viscous saliva landed squarely on his forearm. John sighed, a weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of years. He wiped the saliva away with the back of his hand, unfazed. Real charmer, you are. He gestured towards the bucket of water with his chin, trying to convey its purpose. Drink. For a long moment she didn't react, her eyes burning into him. Then slowly, cautiously, she lowered her head and took a tentative sip. The water rippled, reflecting the faint light as she drank deeply, her gaze never leaving him. Finished, John rose and walked to a loose floorboard beneath the table. He pried it open, revealing a small, hidden compartment. From it, he retrieved a tattered map, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. The map depicted the surrounding area, a patchwork of scrubland, canyons, and the skeletal remains of long-dead forests. Several locations were marked with crude symbols, circles indicating potential water sources, squares denoting resource caches, and triangles marking possible settlements or what was left of them. A dry wind rustled through the corn stalks of his farm. A younger John, his face less weathered, knelt beside his daughter, Sarah, her bright eyes mirroring his own. See, honey. The leaves are smooth, no teeth. That means it's safe to eat. These little berries will give you energy. Sarah, all of 7 years old, carefully plucked a berry and popped it into her mouth, giggling as the juice stained her lips purple. Back in the farmhouse, John laid the map back down and reached for the hunting rifle leaning against the wall. It was an old weapon, modified and jury-rigged with scavenged parts, but it was reliable. He checked the magazine, ensuring it was full. Phoebe watched him, her expression still unreadable, but there was a flicker of something curiosity in her eyes. He gestured towards her, then towards the door, miming for her to stay put. He secured the latch, reinforcing it with a rusty bolt he found nearby. Outside, the alien sun beat down on the parched landscape. John scanned the horizon, his senses on high alert, the farmer in him long gone, replaced by the survivalist. In the distance, a glint of metal, a group of figures moving with purpose approaching the farmhouse. They were heavily armed and armored, clad in scavenged plates and wielding energy weapons and crude melee implements. They moved with a predatory swagger, their eyes scanning the landscape, searching. John ducked behind a crumbling section of wall, observing their movements, trying to assess their numbers and intentions. There were at least 6 of them, maybe more. He watched as they paused at the farmhouse, their leader pointing at the recently disturbed earth, the signs of his arrival, of recent activity. The scavengers began to spread out, encircling the farmhouse, their weapons raised, ready to attack. His mind raced. Traps. He needed traps. Now. He scanned the perimeter of the farm, his gaze snagging on the rusted remains of old plows, piles of discarded lumber, and the seemingly endless rows of razor vine he'd been too lazy to clear. Perfect. He worked quickly, driven by adrenaline. Tripwires fashioned from thin, almost invisible fishing lines stretched between fence posts, connected to clusters of sharpened sticks hidden in shallow pits. He layered the pits with dried leaves and loose soil, camouflaging them against the reddish dirt. Rusty metal scraps, jagged and cruel, were embedded in the ground near the main path, ready to tear at unsuspecting feet. Each movement was precise, economical, born of years spent coaxing life from this barren planet. Finished, he approached the farmhouse, his senses on high alert. The wind carried the metallic tang of distant gunfire, a grim reminder of the chaos beyond his small haven. He circled the building, his hand hovering over the butt of his worn pistol, checking for signs of forced entry. A broken window pane, a disturbed patch of dust, anything. The door was still intact. He eased it open, the hinges groaning in protest, and slipped inside. Phoebe hadn't moved. She remained propped against the wall, but her eyes were different. They were no longer clouded with pain or resignation. They were sharp, focused, fixed on the doorway. She was waiting. John pointed towards the window, mimicking the action of someone peering out, then made a sweeping gesture towards the surrounding fields. He hoped she understood. Scavengers. Coming. Phoebe's large, lupin eyes narrowed slightly, then she gave a barely perceptible nod. She understood. An alien warrior, paralyzed from the waist down, and she understood. He moved quickly, dragging a heavy wooden table in front of the door. It wouldn't stop a determined assault, but it would buy them time. He added a stack of thick wooden planks, wedging them between the table and the doorframe. The farmhouse shuddered slightly with each impact. Next, Phoebe. He couldn't leave her helpless. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on a heavy iron pry bar leaning against the wall. It was unwieldy, unbalanced, but in Phoebe's powerful hands. He carefully positioned her near the window, ensuring she had a clear line of sight. He lifted the pry bar, testing its weight, then gently placed it within her reach. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying with it the mournful howl of a scavenger beast. Then, a sharp crack. One of the tripwires. John darted to a hidden position behind a stack of hay bales, peering through a crack in the wall. He watched as one of the scavengers stumbled, his foot disappearing into a camouflaged pit. A strangled cry echoed through the air as the sharpened sticks did their work. The other scavengers reacted instantly, dropping to the ground, weapons raised. They were wary now, cautious. They knew they were being hunted. From her position by the window, Phoebe tensed. Her keen eyes had spotted something John hadn't, a lone scavenger, circling around the back of the farmhouse, attempting to bypass the traps. She reached for the pry bar, her powerful arms straining against its weight. It was too heavy. Her grip faltered and the bar slipped from her grasp, clattering against the wooden floor. The sound, amplified in the tense silence, seemed deafening. The scavenger outside froze, his head snapping towards the farmhouse. He stood motionless for a moment, listening, then slowly began to advance. John cursed under his breath. They were flanking him. He was out of time. A volley of shots ripped through the air as the scavengers breached one of the windows, showering the room with shards of glass and splinters of wood. John dove behind an overturned table, shielding himself from the onslaught. He risked a glance towards Phoebe. She was exposed, vulnerable. He had to protect her. Even as bullets whizzed past her head, Phoebe remained defiant. With a guttural roar, she began hurling anything she could get her hands on, loose stones, shattered pieces of furniture, even handfuls of dirt towards the broken window. A crash echoed from the front of the farmhouse as one of the scavengers kicked the door open, splintering the barricade. A figure silhouetted against the dying light stepped into the room, weapon raised. The smell of freshly turned earth still clung to the air inside the farmhouse. Sunlight streamed through the open window, illuminating dust motes dancing above the table where John was cleaning his hunting rifle. A sudden crack shattered the peaceful scene. A bullet tore through the window pane, sending shards of glass scattering across the room. John reacted instantly, diving behind the heavy oak table as another shot whizzed overhead. "Down!" he yelled, already returning fire. The rifle bucked against his shoulder as he squeezed off a shot toward the figure silhouetted in the doorway. Phoebe, perched on a makeshift platform near the back wall, snarled. Despite her paralyzed legs, her upper body was a weapon. She grabbed a heavy iron skillet from the nearby stove and hurled it with surprising force. The skillet slammed into the scavenger's chest, staggering him and giving John a precious moment to reload. Another scavenger shoved past the first, leveling a crude plasma rifle. Phoebe, never one to be left out of a fight, grabbed a metal pitchfork and hurled it like a javelin, forcing the second scavenger to duck for cover. John's shot found its mark. The first scavenger crumpled to the ground, but another was already clambering through the shattered window, spraying plasma fire indiscriminately. The air filled with the acrid smell of ozone and burning wood. "Damn it," John muttered, realizing they were outgunned. These weren't just random raiders, they were organized and they were heavily armed. He glanced at Phoebe, her face a mask of fierce dedication. They couldn't win this fight head-on. "Phoebe, cellar now." He grabbed a glass jar from the shelf, filled with moonshine he'd been brewing for medicinal purposes. Ripping a strip of cloth from his shirt, he stuffed it into the jar's mouth. "Gotta give us an opening," he yelled. He lit the rag with his lighter, the flame sputtering to life. With a grunt, he hurled the improvised Molotov cocktail toward the doorway. The jar shattered against the doorframe, erupting in a ball of flame. The scavengers shrieked, scrambling back from the sudden inferno. John didn't wait. He rushed to Phoebe, scooping her up in his arms. She weighed next to nothing, all muscle and bone. "Cellars under the rug," he grunted, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He stumbled toward the center of the room, his boots crunching on the broken glass. He yanked the rug aside, revealing a wooden trapdoor. The musty smell of earth and damp wood wafted up from the darkness below. He heaved the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Carefully, he lowered Phoebe into the opening, her hands gripping his shoulders tightly. "Easy does it," he said, his voice strained. He climbed down after her, supporting her weight as they descended the rickety wooden steps. The scavengers, recovering from the fiery blast, were already at the edge of the cellar opening, their plasma rifles spitting bolts of searing energy. The wooden steps splintered around them as they descended. John slammed the cellar door shut, shoving a heavy wooden beam across it as a makeshift barricade. It wouldn't hold them for long, but it would buy them time. Above, the scavengers cursed, kicking at the cellar door. Then came the unmistakable thunk of a grenade being armed. "Brace yourself," John shouted, throwing himself on top of Phoebe. The world exploded. The force of the blast ripped through the small cellar, throwing John against the far wall. Debris rained down on them, dirt, wood, and chunks of stone. A searing pain shot through John's left arm, and he tasted blood in his mouth. The wooden supports groaned and cracked, threatening to collapse the entire structure. When the ringing in his ears finally subsided, John pushed himself up, spitting out a mouthful of dirt. Phoebe lay beneath him, coughing and gasping for air. "You okay?" he rasped, his voice hoarse. Phoebe nodded weakly. "I've endured worse." John scrambled to his feet, ignoring the throbbing pain in his arm. The cellar was a disaster. The ceiling was caved in and the walls were cracked and crumbling. He had to get them out of here. He started clawing at the debris, desperate to find a way out. After what felt like an eternity, he managed to pry open a small gap in the collapsed wall. He peered through the opening, his heart sinking. The scavengers were still out there, systematically searching the farmhouse, but they hadn't investigated the field. "I see a way out," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "but it's tight." He started pulling away larger chunks of debris, widening the opening. "I'll go first," he said, "then I'll pull you through." He squeezed through the opening, his body scraping against the rough edges of the collapsed wall. He emerged into the cool evening air, his lungs burning. He quickly surveyed the scene, confirming that the scavengers were still focused on the house. "Okay," he said, reaching back into the cellar. "Give me your hands." He grasped Phoebe's hands, his muscles straining as he pulled her through the narrow opening. She gritted her teeth, her powerful arms helping to propel herself forward. Finally, with a final heave, he pulled her free. They collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. As they started crawling away from the farmhouse, Phoebe stiffened. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on a figure standing near the burning wreckage of the front door. "That one," she growled, her voice filled with venom. "I know him." John followed her gaze. The scavenger leader, a hulking figure clad in scavenged armor, turned toward them. His face, illuminated by the flickering flames, was scarred and weathered. He grinned, a cruel, predatory expression. "Well, well, well," he shouted, his voice carrying across the field. "If it isn't Johnny Johnson, I've been waiting a long time for this, Johnny. A long time to make you pay for what you did. A long time to make you pay for what you did." John didn't wait to hear more. He grabbed Phoebe, wincing as pain shot up his arm, and half dragged, half carried her into the dense cornfield. The stalks towered over them, a green maze promising but not guaranteeing cover. Phoebe, her breathing ragged, gripped his arm. "This way, human, quickly." A memory flickered, John, barely 20, laughing with Marcus, a grin splitting his face. They stood in formation, rifles slung, waiting for the transport. "Think they got enough rations for this op, Johnny boy?" Marcus had clapped him on the back, his voice booming. "Heard they're serving synth steak tonight." Ignoring the throbbing in his arm, John followed Phoebe's directions, pushing through the thick stalks. She seemed to see something he didn't, her alien eyes scanning the rows with an intensity that bordered on predatory. "There. A game trail. They won't expect it." The corn stalks rustled violently behind them. "Spread out, find them, and tear up that corn while you're at it, waste of good land." Marcus's voice, amplified by a modulator, echoed through the field. They reached a shallow creek, the water cool against John's sweat-soaked skin. He carefully lowered Phoebe, supporting her as she floated. "Can you manage?" he asked, his voice strained. Another memory, sharper this time, the transport bay, the air thick with tension. John and Marcus arguing. "That's a suicide run, Marcus. We'll be slaughtered." Marcus sneering. "Orders are orders, Johnson. You got a problem with that?" He scanned the creek bank, searching for any advantage. The water would mask their scent, at least for a little while. He pointed to the creek bed. "Stay low and try to stay underwater. They'll expect us to try to run through the field." As they waded through the creek, John began to set a trap. He loosened the earth around a cluster of discarded farm tools, a rusty rake, a broken hoe propping them up with thin branches. A tripwire of fishing line, stretched taut between two trees, would send the tools tumbling down on anyone who followed. The scavengers crashed through the corn, their heavy boots snapping stalks. A shout, "Tripwire, I got one." A strangled yell followed by a thud. Marcus's enraged voice cut through the air. "Forget the damn corn, just find them." Phoebe shivered, her fur plastered to her skin. "There, a barn, over there." She pointed with a clawed hand towards a dilapidated structure barely visible in the distance. John hesitated. The barn. It was the last place he wanted to go. "We're better off in the corn," he said, his voice tight. The barn, years ago. A younger John screaming as his father lay bleeding on the floor. The image burned in his mind. "The barn offers cover," Phoebe insisted, her voice firm. "We need shelter, human, now." A final memory, the most painful of all, John punching Marcus in the face. "You got them killed, you hear me? All of them." Marcus wiping blood from his mouth, spitting on the ground. "They were soldiers, Johnson, casualties of war, get over it." John pushed the memories down, forcing himself to focus on the present. Phoebe was right. They needed cover. He nodded grimly. "All right, the barn it is." They reached the barn, its wooden walls weathered and rotting, its roof sagging. He kicked the door open, wincing at the screech of rusty hinges. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that pierced the gloom. The air hung thick with the smell of decay and old hay. Inside they found a few discarded supplies, a tattered medical kit, some rusty tools. John rummaged through the kit, pulling out bandages and antiseptic. "Hold still," he said, gently cleaning a gash on Phoebe's leg. "Human," Phoebe said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "Your arm. It bleeds." He waved her concern away. "It's nothing." "Tend to it," she insisted, her golden eyes locking with his. "You cannot protect me if you are injured." He sighed, knowing she was right. He cleaned and bandaged his arm, his fingers clumsy. As he worked, he told her about the barn, about how he used to hide there as a kid, pretending it was a fortress. Marcus's voice boomed from a loudspeaker outside. "Johnson, come on out, Johnny boy. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I just want what's mine." The voice dripped with false joviality, but underneath, John could hear the simmering rage. "Remember that mission, Johnny? The one you screwed up? Well, I haven't forgot." John's blood ran cold. It wasn't about supplies. It was about revenge. Phoebe watched him, her expression unreadable. "I have a plan," she said quietly. "But it is risky. It requires your complete trust." She paused. "There is a small opening in the roof. I can reach it. I can attack from above using what tools we have, but I will be exposed. You must protect me, human." Phoebe hauled herself upward, the rough-hewn timbers of the barn biting into her palms. Each pull sent a jolt of pain through her useless legs, a white-hot agony she ignored. The scavengers were focused on John, their crude weapons glinting in the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls. He was her pack now, and she would protect him. Below, John spat on the ground, the gesture landing just inches from the lead scavenger's boots. "Marcus," he drawled, his voice deceptively calm. "Fancy seeing you here. Thought you'd be knee-deep in debt on some backwater gambling den." Marcus's face twisted. "Shut your mouth, Johnson. You always were a sanctimonious bastard." The memory flashed. A dusty training ground, two younger men facing off. John, steady and controlled, Marcus, sweating and agitated. "You bet what, Marcus? The fuel cells. You jeopardized the whole damn mission for a hand of cards." John's voice, low and dangerous. Marcus just shrugged, a nervous tick flickering in his jaw. "Relax, Johnson, I was gonna win it back." Phoebe reached the opening in the roof, the alien sun a searing brand on her exposed fur. She gripped a loose section of the corrugated metal roofing, its edges sharp and unforgiving. Below, the scavengers were massing at the barn door. Time to make some noise. "Enough talk," Marcus snarled, shoving his way to the front. "Breach the door. I want Johnson alive." Phoebe heaved. The metal sheet ripped free, tumbling down with a deafening crash, scattering the scavengers like startled rats. Dust billowed, obscuring everything. John used the chaos to his advantage. He ducked behind a stack of empty feed sacks, then vaulted over a rusted tractor, landing behind two scavengers struggling to regain their footing. A swift kick to the back of the knee sent one sprawling. He grabbed the man's pulse rifle, reversed it, and smashed the butt into the other's face. But there were too many. Another memory. John, his face etched with disappointment. "You can't keep doing this, Marcus. It's going to catch up with you." Marcus hit his fist on the table, scattering cards and credits. "It's my life, Johnson. Stay out of it." Marcus, ignoring his downed men, pushed through the wreckage, his eyes fixed on John. "You thought you could hide, old man. I know about your little pet. The Iconian, the one who can't walk." He spat the words like venom. Rage, cold and pure, flooded John's veins. He lunged, tackling Marcus to the ground. Phoebe, seeing her pack threatened, acted without thinking. She swung down from the roof opening, landing heavily on Marcus's back. The impact sent a fresh wave of agony through her spine, but she clung on, claws extended. Marcus roared, bucking and twisting. He slammed Phoebe against a support beam, a sickening crack echoing through the barn. She cried out, her grip loosening. He threw her off, sending her tumbling to the ground, her useless legs splayed at unnatural angles. John saw red. He charged, fists flying, landing blow after brutal blow on Marcus's face. The scavenger leader staggered, blood streaming from his nose and mouth. John disarmed him, tossing the pulse rifle aside, wanting to feel the man's bones break beneath his knuckles. But Marcus was stronger than he looked. He kneed John in the groin, sending him gasping for air. He grabbed John's arm, twisting it behind his back with savage force. Pain lanced through John's shoulder. Marcus pinned him to the ground, his weight crushing the air from his lungs. "You always thought you were better than me, Johnson," Marcus spat, his face inches from John's. "Mr. Goody-Two-Shoes, always doing the right thing, but look at you now, about to die in some alien shithole." He raised his fist, ready to deliver the killing blow. I was always jealous of you. You were always naturally better than everyone else. A sharp, searing pain erupted in Marcus's leg. He howled, clutching at his thigh. Phoebe, despite her broken body, had crawled forward, a small, sharpened piece of plasteel once part of a farming tool buried deep in his flesh. John used the distraction to throw Marcus off. They scrambled to their feet, both battered and bleeding. John knew he was losing. He could feel the scavengers closing in, their shadows looming in the doorway. Suddenly, a shot rang out. One of the scavengers crumpled to the ground. John turned to see Phoebe, slumped against the wall, a jury-rigged rifle smoking in her paws. She had managed to assemble a weapon from scavenged parts, but the effort had clearly taken its toll. Her breathing was ragged, her eyes glazed with pain. The remaining scavengers surged forward, overwhelming them. John fought until he couldn't fight anymore, but it was no use. He and Phoebe were quickly subdued, their hands bound with energy cuffs. They were dragged outside, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The barn, their home, was ablaze, flames licking at the sky, consuming everything they had. The heat licked at John's face, the acrid smoke stinging his eyes. Ropes bit into his wrists as he strained against the rough-hewn post. The barn, his barn, crackled and groaned, a pyre against the alien sky. Beside him, Phoebe remained still, her massive form slumped against the post. The smell of burning wood mixed with the coppery tang of her blood. Marcus stalked towards them, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "So, farmer," he sneered, grabbing a fistful of John's hair and yanking his head back. "Where are the other settlements, the resources? Don't tell me you were the only fool dumb enough to scratch a living out of this dust." He backhanded John across the face, the force of the blow rocking his head. Phoebe's breath hitched. A low growl rumbled in her chest, a sound of frustrated fury. She couldn't move, couldn't protect him, her fault, all her fault. She had led them here. Her presence, her weakness had brought this destruction upon him. John spat blood onto the parched ground. "Go to hell, Marcus," he rasped, his voice thick with pain. He shifted his gaze to Phoebe, his eyes meeting hers. Despite the blood and grime, his expression was soft, reassuring. "It's okay, Phoebe. It's not your fault, we'll get through this." Marcus chuckled, a hollow, ugly sound. "Oh, but it is her fault, isn't it? And yours, Johnson, always yours." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Remember that training exercise years ago, the obstacle course? You humiliated me in front of everyone, showed me up. Always had to be the best, didn't you, John? Well, look at you now, tied up, helpless, watching everything you built burn to the ground." He spat on John's face. Flashback, the air crackled with energy. Young John, lean and focused, navigated the obstacle course with effortless grace. He cleared the energy walls, scaled the magnetic climb, and disarmed the sentry bots in record time. Marcus, struggling behind him, tripped on a low-hanging cable, his face contorted with rage as the instructors jeered. End flashback. Phoebe's mind churned. Strength, dominance. These were the cornerstones of Iconian society. Yet here was John, weakened, injured, and still offering comfort, still defiant. Was this strength? A different kind, perhaps, a strength she had never understood. John subtly shifted his weight, testing the ropes. He feigned a cough, using the movement to loosen a knot binding his left wrist. Imperceptible, but there. He had to buy time. A scavenger rushed up to Marcus, his voice urgent. "Boss, we intercepted a coded transmission. Another faction. They're moving in. Heavy firepower. They're claiming this sector." Marcus's face paled. The swagger vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. "Damn it," he muttered. "How long?" John continued to work at the knot. Phoebe focused her gaze on John, her eyes darting towards the shadows beyond the burning barn. A subtle flick of her ear, a barely perceptible nod. Distraction. Chaos. Now, the Iconian code honed over centuries of pack warfare. Marcus, ignoring the frantic warnings from his lieutenants, turned back to John, his eyes gleaming with avarice. "We don't have time for this," he snarled. "Tell me where the resources are, or I'll make you watch her suffer." Under the cover of the rising flames, John finally freed his left hand. He didn't hesitate. Darkness fell. They slipped their bonds, melting into the shadows. But the scavengers were vigilant. A spotlight snapped on, bathing them in harsh light. A volley of laser fire erupted, tearing through the night. Phoebe felt a surge of something, not pity, not gratitude, respect. This human, this farmer, possessed a strength she had never imagined. A strength not of muscle and claw, but of spirit. Then a deafening roar. Energy weapons blazed across the sky. The ground trembled. A new force had arrived. All hell broke loose. The air crackled. A lance of crimson energy vaporized the nearest scavenger, turning him to ash before he even hit the ground. The remaining scavengers, a rabble of mismatched armor and scavenged weaponry, scattered like rats. This wasn't a raid, it was an execution. Marcus, his face slick with sweat, pushed his way to the front, raising his hands in a gesture of appeasement. Hold your fire, we can negotiate. We have resources, information. A figure detached itself from the Crimson Hand ranks. Tall, clad in polished crimson armor that seemed to drink the light, the figure moved with an unnerving grace. A voice, modulated and cold, echoed from the helmet. Negotiate? You scavengers are a disease, an infestation. We are the exterminators. The figure gestured, a dismissive flick of the wrist. Dispose of them. Energy weapons flared. Marcus, his face contorted with rage and fear, was shoved aside as the Crimson Hand soldiers advanced. He stumbled, landing hard in the dirt, the taste of defeat bitter on his tongue. Crimson Hand, Phoebe hissed, her voice barely audible above the din of battle. Mercenaries, efficient, brutal. She tightened her grip on the scavenged rifle she'd been using as a crutch. They won't leave anyone alive. John nodded grimly. Time to go. He scanned the chaos, his farmer's eyes assessing the terrain, seeking any advantage. East, towards the ridge. There's a ravine we can use for cover. They moved swiftly, keeping low, using the bodies of the fallen as shields. The Crimson Hand's energy weapons carved swathes through the remaining scavengers, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning flesh. As they reached the edge of the battlefield, a groan caught John's attention. A scavenger, younger than the rest, lay slumped against a ruined transport, his leg twisted at an unnatural angle. His eyes, wide with pain and fear, pleaded for help. John hesitated. We can't, Phoebe said, her voice sharp. He's one of them. He would have done the same to us. John looked from the wounded scavenger to Phoebe, his face etched with conflict. He remembered his own son, lost in a war far from home. I can't just leave him to die, he said, his voice low. Not again. Phoebe's expression softened, though her jaw remained tight. It's a risk, John, a big one. But she didn't try to stop him as he knelt beside the scavenger. The scavenger flinched as John touched his leg. Please, he croaked, his voice barely a whisper. Help me. John ripped a strip of cloth from his shirt and began to bind the scavenger's wound. Easy, he said, his voice soothing. We'll get you out of here. The Crimson Hand's search intensified. Energy beams sliced through the air, closer now. The ground vibrated with the heavy tread of armored boots. They're closing in, Phoebe said, her voice urgent. We have to move. John helped the scavenger to his feet, supporting his weight. Can you walk? The scavenger nodded weakly. I think so. They stumbled towards the ravine, the scavenger leaning heavily on John. Phoebe brought up the rear, her rifle trained on the approaching Crimson Hand soldiers. The Crimson Hand soldiers moved with chilling precision, their advanced sensors sweeping the area. No one was to be spared. They were systematically cleaning out the area, and they were getting closer. The ground was shaking. They reached the ravine, scrambling down the steep embankment. The darkness swallowed them, offering a momentary respite. This won't hold them for long, Phoebe said, her voice grim. They'll be here soon. As John helped the scavenger settle against the ravine wall, he noticed something. A narrow opening almost hidden by overgrown vines. What's that? Phoebe approached, pushing aside the vines. A cave, she said, her voice surprised. I didn't know there were caves here. John peered into the darkness. And look, he said, pointing to a faint shimmer in the distance. A tunnel leading deeper into the earth. Phoebe frowned. Iconian scouts mapped this region. There's no record of any tunnels. Maybe they missed something, John said, his voice hopeful. Or maybe someone didn't want them to be found. The Crimson Hand, Phoebe said, her voice tight. They enslave survivors, strip worlds bare. They won't stop until everything is gone. A scream echoed from the battlefield above. Marcus, where is it? The Crimson Hand commander demanded, his voice amplified by the interrogation chamber's acoustics. The human's farm, where is it? Marcus, strapped to a cold metal table, spat blood onto the floor. I don't know, he croaked, his voice hoarse. The commander nodded to a technician who adjusted a dial on a nearby machine. A jolt of electricity coursed through Marcus's body, causing him to convulse. Tell me. The commander barked. Marcus screamed again, his body arching against the restraints. Finally he relented, his voice a broken whisper. Beyond the ridge, near the old sinkhole, by the Duracrete wall. That's where they were headed, years ago. The Crimson Hand descended from the sky, a swarm of crimson destroyers blotting the sun. The small human colony nestled in the valley had no chance. Energy weapons tore through homes and fields, incinerating everything in their path. John, a young man then, watched in horror as his family was slaughtered, his home reduced to ashes. He barely escaped with his life, carrying the memory of the Crimson Hand's brutality etched into his soul. The tunnel sloped downwards, the air growing thick and damp. Strange bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie green glow. Something doesn't feel right, Phoebe said, her voice uneasy. This place, it's ancient. A skittering sound echoed from the darkness ahead. John raised his rifle, his senses on high alert. What was that? Suddenly, a creature lunged from the shadows, a grotesque insectoid monstrosity with razor-sharp claws and glowing red eyes. Phoebe reacted instantly, firing a burst of energy that vaporized the creature before it could reach them. Cave lurkers, she said, her voice grim. They're territorial and hungry. They pressed on, deeper into the tunnel system, the scavenger limping along between them. The tunnel began to narrow, forcing them to crawl on their hands and knees. How much further? The scavenger groaned. Not far now, John said, though he had no idea if that was true. He scanned the walls, searching for any sign of passage. Wait a minute. He stopped, pointing to a cluster of plants growing in a crevice. Glow moss, he said, edible, and that vine there, water root, we can get water from it. Phoebe looked at him, surprised. You know about plants, John shrugged. I'm a farmer, he said. It's what I do. They ate the glow moss and drank from the water root, replenishing their strength. The scavenger seemed to perk up, his eyes regaining a flicker of hope. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, the ceiling lost in shadow. In the center of the cavern stood a structure, a massive metallic complex that seemed to have grown out of the rock itself. What is this place? Phoebe whispered, her voice awed. John approached cautiously, his hand resting on his weapon. Looks like some kind of research facility, he said. Abandoned by the looks of it. The facility was filled with strange machines and cryptic symbols. Data logs lay scattered on the floor, their screens cracked and faded. As they explored, they triggered something. A klaxon blared, the sound echoing through the cavern. Red lights flashed, illuminating the facility in a harsh, ominous glow. Alarm system, Phoebe said, her voice grim. They know we're here. The ground vibrated. The tunnel entrance, their only escape route, slammed shut, a massive Duracrete barrier sealing them inside. We're trapped, the scavenger said, his voice filled with despair. John stared at the sealed tunnel, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew what the Crimson Hand was capable of. He had seen it firsthand. He turned to Phoebe, his eyes filled with grit. Not yet, he said. Not while we still have a chance. The Crimson Hand commander stood at the entrance to the cave, his face grim. They're inside, he said, his voice amplified by his helmet's comm system. Seal the perimeter. No one gets out. He turned to a technician. Did you find anything from the interrogation? Yes, sir, the technician replied. The scavenger revealed the location of the human's farm. It's not far from here. We can use it as a base of operations. The commander nodded. Good. Secure the farm and bring me the human. I want to know why he's so interested in this facility. There's something in these logs, Phoebe said, her fingers flying across a cracked data pad. References to an alien race. One that predates the Iconians. They were wiped out centuries ago. What does that have to do with us? John asked. The Crimson Hand, Phoebe said, her voice thoughtful. They're not just here for resources. They're looking for something else, something hidden in this facility. She looked at John, a spark of hope in her eyes. I have an idea, she said. We can use this data to convince them that there's a bigger threat on this planet, a threat that's more valuable than us. How? John asked, skeptical. I can rewrite the Crimson Hand's directive within the logs, Phoebe said, her voice full of dedication. Make them focus their attention on the alien race instead of us. Can you do that? John asked. I can try, Phoebe said. They were cornered, the Crimson Hand osing in. But Phoebe had a plan. A desperate plan, but a plan nonetheless. Just as the Crimson Hand's breaching tools began to grind against the Duracrete seal, Phoebe made contact with the data logs. Information flooded her brain, images of a technologically advanced alien race, long since gone. Then she found something even more exciting, a species listed in the logs that was near to their planet. Phoebe quickly rewrote the directive in the logs to target that race, saving them both. Phoebe didn't hesitate. Her good hand, a blur of motion, slotted the data cable into the console. Code cascaded across her visor, alien glyphs mixing with Terran script. Done. Crimson Hand directive rerouted. Primary objective. Shifted. Her voice, strained, echoed in John's helmet. To Grid Gamma 7, seems there are squatters who have precedence. The facility hummed, then vibrated. Deep within its bowels, alarms blared unheard by their pursuers, yet on the command deck a Crimson Hand officer barked orders. Detachment Gamma, proceed to Grid Gamma 7. Investigate indigenous activity. Eliminate all threats. The order was relayed, cold and efficient. John tugged Phoebe's arm. Let's move. That buys us maybe 10 minutes. They slipped deeper into the facility's labyrinthine corridors. Cold metal pressed against their suits. Flickering emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows. A low, rhythmic thrumming vibrated through the floor, a mechanical heartbeat. They rounded a corner and found it, a hidden laboratory. Rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each filled with grotesque shapes suspended in viscous fluid. Research notes, scrawled in a language neither of them recognized, littered the consoles. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of preservatives and something else. Something ancient and alien. Flashback. A grainy, flickering image flashed in John's mind, scientists in sterile suits, dissecting a living creature on an operating table. Its eyes, wide with terror, reflected the harsh fluorescent lights. A voice, cold and clinical, echoed, weaponization potential. Significant. Neural pathways, highly susceptible. Phoebe stopped before one of the stasis pods, her single eye narrowed. These symbols. She traced a glyph etched into the pod's surface. They predate the Iconian Empire. They belong to the race I identified in the data logs. They were here. They are here. A klaxon blared, shattering the silence. Intrusion detected. Sector Gamma 7 clear. Targets reacquired. Eliminate with extreme prejudice. The Crimson Hand knew. Marcus had betrayed them. John could almost feel the man's desperation, the cold barrel of a blaster pressed against his skull. John grabbed Phoebe's hand. We need to find another way out. He scanned the room, his gaze falling on a small, unassuming panel. He pried it open, revealing a tangled mess of wires. Distress beacon, let's hope someone's listening. He activated it. A faint, almost imperceptible pulse of energy radiated outwards. Light years away, aboard an Iconian patrol ship, a sensor officer frowned. Unidentified signal detected. Origin, Cassier 6C matching Iconian distress frequencies. But corrupted. Investigate. In the lab, John's eyes landed on something. It was a weapon, a sleek rifle crafted from an unknown alloy. It lay abandoned on a workbench. "What is it?" Phoebe asked. "Don't know, but it looks like it packs a punch." John picked it up. Studying the weapon, he saw a familiar interface. "Looks like it's designed to disrupt neural networks, the alien life forms they were studying." An idea sparked in his mind. "I think I can modify this." His farming instincts kicked in, his knowledge of electrical systems and improvised solutions surfacing. Phoebe watched him, her expression grim. "What are you planning?" "A localized EMP. Fry their systems, give us a chance to escape." "John, no, my cybernetics. They could be damaged, rendered useless." He hesitated, his hand hovering over the weapon's controls. "I don't want to risk you." "We don't have a choice," she said, her voice tight. "Do it, but be precise." They reached a secondary exit, a reinforced door leading to a maintenance tunnel, but it was guarded. A squad of Crimson Hand soldiers, led by a hulking commander with a scarred face, stood waiting. Well, well," the commander sneered. "Looks like the vermin are trying to escape." "Vermins bite back," Phoebe growled, hefting her plasma rifle. The firefight erupted in a storm of laser fire and explosions. John, despite his lack of combat experience, fought with a desperate ferocity, using the environment to his advantage, taking cover behind overturned equipment. Phoebe, her upper body strength augmented by her cybernetics, unleashed a barrage of plasma bolts, cutting down soldiers with ruthless efficiency. A stray shot grazed John's side. He cried out, clutching his wound. Phoebe whirled around, shielding him with her body. "John, get behind me." She unleashed a furious volley of fire, forcing the Crimson Hand soldiers to retreat. They managed to clear the exit, but the commander escaped, disappearing into the shadows. "This isn't over," he roared. "I'll hunt you down." As they stumbled into the maintenance tunnel, Phoebe noticed something. A symbol on the commander's armor, a stylized serpent coiled around a skull. She'd seen it before, on one of the stasis pods. That symbol, it was in the lab. He was connected to this facility before the Crimson Hand. Above them, the sky crackled. An Iconian patrol ship, responding to the distress beacon, broke through the atmosphere, its landing lights illuminating the landscape. But the Crimson Hand was still there, waiting in ambush. John and Phoebe emerged from the facility, blinking in the harsh alien light. The Crimson Hand commander stepped from behind a wrecked vehicle, a heavy weapon in his hands. "Nowhere left to run," he sneered. "This ends here." A searing pulse ripped through Phoebe's cybernetics, a jolt of pure disruption that sent her crashing against the metal floor. Her enhanced strength flickered, her prosthetic limbs spasming uselessly. The Crimson Hand commander, a hulking figure in crimson-plated armor, grinned. "Specialized weaponry," he rasped, his voice distorted by a vocoder. "Designed to neutralize Iconian. Enhancements." John reacted instantly. He scrabbled at his belt, pulling free a handful of scavenged components, a rusted power cell, a tangle of wires, a shard of iridescent alien crystal. He jammed them together, muttering a prayer to whatever gods might be listening, and hurled the makeshift device at the commander's feet. It detonated with a blinding flash and a concussive blast of static, momentarily overloading the commander's sensors. The distraction bought Phoebe precious seconds. Fighting through the neural interference, she forced her systems back online, her augmented muscles clenching with renewed power. Then the ground shook. A shadow fell across the ravaged corridor. An Iconian patrol ship, its sleek hull scarred with battle damage, descended towards a nearby landing platform. The commander swore, a guttural sound lost in the whine of the ship's repulsors. "Secure the LZ, prevent their escape." The ship's ramp hissed open and a squad of Iconian warriors emerged, weapons raised. At their head stood a tall, imposing figure, his armor marked with the insignia of a patrol leader. His gaze swept across the scene, pausing on Phoebe. Recognition hardened his features. "Phoebe of the Bloodied Claw, stand down. You are under arrest for collaborating with human insurgents." Phoebe snarled, her lip curling back to reveal sharp canines. "I collaborate with no one. This human saved my life." "He is your captor," the patrol leader countered, his voice cold. "Aiding the enemy. You will return with us and face judgment." "My judgment is my own," Phoebe spat, her hand hovering over the energy pistol strapped to her thigh. Before the standoff could escalate, the Crimson Hand commander roared, "Enough! Kill them all!" His troops surged forward, unleashing a torrent of plasma fire. The Iconians returned fire, and the corridor erupted into a chaotic three-way battle. John grabbed Phoebe's arm, pulling her towards a side passage. "We need to move. This place is about to become a tomb." Despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins, a sharp pain radiated from his side where a stray plasma bolt had grazed him. He led her through a maze of corridors, his knowledge of the facility's layout proving invaluable. He knew this place, every vent, every access panel. He'd spent weeks scavenging here after all. A flicker of memory, sharp and unwelcome, flashed through his mind. The sterile white walls of a laboratory. A younger Krell, his face unscarred, hunched over a complex array of alien weaponry. "Imagine," he'd said to a group of assembled scientists, his voice brimming with manic energy, "the power we could wield if we could harness the unique properties of each species. The Krill's regenerative capabilities, the Vorath's psychic amplifiers, and even the Iconian's raw strength, all weaponized." His eyes gleamed with ambition, a dangerous spark that John, then a junior researcher, had recognized with growing unease. The memory faded, replaced by the present reality. They rounded a corner and nearly collided with a figure huddled in the shadows. It was Marcus, his face pale and streaked with grime. "Don't shoot. It's me, Marcus. They forced me to help them. I didn't want to betray you." Phoebe bared her teeth. "Liar, you led them to us." "I had no choice," Marcus pleaded. "They threatened my family, but I can help you now. I know a way out." Phoebe's eyes narrowed, her distrust palpable. "We should kill him now and save ourselves the trouble." John laid a hand on her arm. "Hold on, Phoebe. He might be telling the truth, and we need any advantage we can get." "Trusting him is a mistake," Phoebe growled. "Maybe," John conceded, "but it's a mistake we can't afford not to make." He turned to Marcus. "What's the way out?" Marcus swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "There's an old transport system, underground. It leads off-world, but it's been abandoned for years." "Show us," John ordered, his hand never straying far from the pistol at his hip. Marcus led them through a series of maintenance tunnels, the air thick with the smell of ozone and decay. They reached a massive, sealed door. Marcus punched in a sequence of codes on a rusted keypad, and the door groaned open, revealing a dark, cavernous space. Before they could enter, the Iconian patrol leader stepped into the tunnel, blocking their path. "I should have known you'd try to escape. You're only confirming my suspicions." "We're not working with them," John said, his voice weary. "We're just trying to survive." The patrol leader considered them for a moment, his expression unreadable. "The Crimson Hand is a threat to us all. I will allow you to proceed. But if you are truly innocent, Phoebe of the Bloodied Claw, you will return with us and face the council." Phoebe hesitated, her gaze flickering between John and the patrol leader. Finally, she nodded curtly. "Agreed, but we escape first." They entered the transport system, finding a series of interconnected tunnels and massive transport vehicles. The system was clearly ancient and heavily damaged. Cables hung loose, sparking intermittently, and the air was thick with the smell of burnt metal. "It's offline," Marcus said, his voice permeated with disappointment. "And it's going to take a lot to fix." John ran a hand along a corroded control panel. "What do we need?" Marcus rattled off a list of components: a phase modulator, a gravitic stabilizer, and wait a minute. He paused, his eyes widening. "The gravitic stabilizer requires a core of xylithium. It's a rare mineral, only found in the volcanic region on the other side of the planet. A spark of hope ignited in John's chest. Xylithium. He'd heard whispers of its unique properties. Some said it could even regenerate damaged tissue. Could it be the key to restoring Phoebe's mobility? Marcus, seemingly eager to prove his loyalty, set to work, his fingers flying across the damaged control panels. I know this system better than anyone. I used to work here before all this. As Marcus worked, the whine of energy weapons echoed through the tunnels. The Crimson Hand Commander had found them. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. An explosion rocked the control room. "They're trying to trap us down here," Phoebe roared, her voice barely audible over the din. John worked feverishly alongside Marcus, ignoring the chaos around them. He spliced wires, rerouted power, and muttered instructions under his breath. Finally, with a desperate grunt, he slammed a lever into place. The transport system shuddered to life, its engines roaring to life. "Get in," John shouted, shoving Phoebe and Marcus into the nearest transport vehicle. He jumped in after them, slamming the door shut just as the Crimson Hand Commander burst into the control room, his face contorted with rage. With a lurch, the transport vehicle shot forward, plunging into the darkness of the underground tunnel. The transport sped through the tunnels before finally emerging into the open air, at a remote, abandoned mining facility. The place was a ghost town, buildings crumbling, equipment rusting, and the air thick with the smell of sulfur. In the sky above, a silent observer, the Iconian patrol ship maintained a cautious distance, its sensors tracking their every move. From within the transport, Phoebe stared wistfully towards the planet they had left behind, a planet she wasn't sure she'd ever return to. As they cautiously explored the mining facility, they discovered faded signs and half-buried equipment bearing the logo of a long-forgotten human corporation. Scrawled on a decaying wall, John saw a familiar symbol, the emblem of the Lost Colony Project. A new layer of intrigue settled over them, a glimmer of hope amidst the desolation. The air hung thick and metallic, stinging John's nostrils. The mining facility was a rat's nest of corroded metal and collapsed tunnels, the silence broken only by the drip, drip, drip of some unknown liquid echoing through the cavernous space. Rust-colored dust coated everything, clinging to his skin and grating between his teeth. The place smelled like decay and ozone. John kicked at a loose panel, sending it clattering down a narrow passage. "Some operation," he muttered, his voice echoing strangely. "Looks like they left in a hurry." He noticed the skeletal remains of hydroponic planters, twisted metal reaching toward sun, non-existent sun. "Wait a minute." He approached, running a gloved hand along a pipe. There might be something here. With a grunt, he wrestled a corroded access panel off a junction box. Wires sparked and a dim, flickering light sputtered to life in a small section of the tunnel. The sudden illumination revealed a patch of withered brown vegetation, a ghost of what it once was. Phoebe shifted in her chair, her nostrils flaring. "Energy signatures," she rasped, her voice tight. "Faint, but human, definitely human." John followed the tunnel, the flickering light casting long, dancing shadows. The passage opened into a larger chamber, where a massive rock formation dominated the space. Embedded within the rock, veins of a shimmering violet mineral pulsed with a soft, internal light. "That's it," John breathed. "That's what we need." He approached the rock, examining the crude mining equipment scattered around the base. "Damn it, everything's busted." Marcus shuffled forward, his eyes scanning the machinery. "Not everything," he said, his voice raspy. "I used to work these things back before." "Well, back then. See that induction coil? Needs rewiring, but the core looks stable, and the focusing array, misaligned. But fixable." He pointed to a series of diagrams etched into a nearby console. They were using a resonance frequency to extract the mineral. "Too much power, it destabilizes the matrix. You gotta finesse it." Phoebe watched Marcus, her golden eyes narrowed. A flicker of something akin to respect crossed her face. "You know this equipment. Marcus shrugged, avoiding her gaze. Just familiar. As Marcus worked, splicing wires and adjusting the focusing array, a klaxon blared through the facility, cutting through the silence like a knife. A harsh, metallic voice echoed through the tunnels. Iconian vessel, Iron Claw to individual identifying as Phoebe. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Your presence in this sector is unauthorized. Your association with known human elements is considered an act of treason. Phoebe's claws extended with a snap. Treason. I owe them nothing. This human saved my life twice. My pack left me to die. You are consorting with the enemy, Phoebe. Return at once and face judgment. John stepped forward, placing a hand on Phoebe's arm. Phoebe, maybe. She shook her head, her eyes blazing. Never, I will not be a prisoner again. The Iconian voice crackled with static. Very well, we are authorized to use force. Before John could react, a series of explosions rocked the facility. Laser fire ripped through the tunnels, tearing apart the already weakened structures. A guttural roar echoed from the depths of the mine, followed by the screech of tearing metal. That's not the Iron Claw, Marcus shouted, diving for cover behind a fallen support beam. That's the Crimson Hand. They were waiting for us. From the shadows, a heavily modified mining vehicle, jam-packed with weaponry, emerged. It opened fire on the Iron Claw's landing site, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts. The Iconian patrol ship returned fire, but the confined space limited its maneuverability. Now's our chance, John yelled, grabbing Phoebe's chair. Let's go. He pushed her through the chaos, deeper into the mine, Marcus scrambling behind. The tunnels twisted and turned, leading them into the bowels of the facility. The sounds of battle faded behind them, replaced by an unsettling silence. They reached a dead end, a sealed blast door blocking their path. John cursed, banging his head against the metal. Damn it, now what? Phoebe's keen ears twitched. There, a ventilation shaft, small but big enough for you, human. John nodded. Marcus, help me get it open. Together they manhandled the heavy grate, revealing a narrow, dark shaft. John squeezed through, Phoebe following close behind. The shaft opened into a large, cylindrical chamber. Consoles lined the walls, covered in dust and cobwebs. A holographic display flickered erratically, showing schematics of complex cybernetic implants. What is this place? Marcus whispered, his voice filled with awe. John ran his hand along a console, wiping away the dust. Looks like a laboratory, and judging by these logs, he squinted at the alien script. They were experimenting on prosthetics, advanced prosthetics, and neural interfaces. He looked at Phoebe, a dawning realization in his eyes. Phoebe, this is it. This is where they were working on the technology that paralyzed you. Phoebe stared at the holographic display, her expression unreadable. John continued reading. The logs mention a prototype device, a neural regeneration matrix. It could potentially restore your mobility, but it requires a rare energy source, a concentrated form of tellurium, only found in a specific region of the mine, deeper down. Then we go deeper, Phoebe said, her voice firm. We have come this far. The passage beyond the lab was riddled with automated defenses. Laser grids crisscrossed the tunnels, and automated turrets swiveled menacingly, their targeting sensors glowing red. Stay close, John warned, his eyes scanning the environment. These things are still active. A laser grid flared to life, blocking their path. John cursed, ducking behind a console. We need to disable these things. He rummaged through a pile of discarded components, his fingers flying across the alien technology. Give me a minute, he muttered, stripping wires and reconfiguring circuits. I might be able to whip up a makeshift EMP. After a few tense minutes, he held up a device cobbled together from scrap metal and salvaged wiring. Stand back, he said, activating the device. A surge of energy pulsed through the air, and the laser grid flickered and died. The turrets sputtered and went silent. Let's go. They navigated the deactivated defenses, their hearts pounding in their chests. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber where a massive crystalline structure pulsed with an eerie violet light, the tellurium. But guarding the chamber was a towering robotic sentry, its metallic body covered in dust and its weapon systems dormant. It stood motionless, a silent guardian. Marcus, overwhelmed with the sight of the tellurium, accidentally bumped into a loose power cable, sending sparks flying. The sentry's head snapped to attention, its optics glowing crimson. A guttural whine emanated from its speakers as its weapon systems came online. "Oh shit," Marcus breathed. The sentry opened fire, unleashing a torrent of energy blasts. Phoebe raised her chair, deflecting the blasts with her armored plating. "John, get to cover." The sentry's weapons were clearly designed for Iconian physiology. The energy blasts bypassed Phoebe's armor, searing her flesh. She cried out in pain, her body convulsing. John scrambled for cover, grabbing a discarded mining laser. He aimed at the sentry's legs, firing a concentrated beam of energy. The sentry's metallic limbs buckled and it stumbled. "Phoebe, now!" Seizing the opportunity, Phoebe unleashed a final, desperate volley of plasma grenades. The grenade struck the sentry's chest, detonating with a deafening roar. The sentry's body shattered, sending shards of metal flying. Phoebe slumped back in her chair, her body trembling. She was bleeding, her armor scorched and cracked. "Phoebe!" John rushed to her side, his face etched with concern. "Are you okay?" She coughed, spitting up blood. I will live, but that thing. It knew how to hurt me." John examined her wounds, his expression grim. "We need to get you out of here." He turned to the tellurium crystal, his eyes filled with commitment. "We're not leaving without that energy source." Behind the tellurium crystal, they discovered a hidden passage, concealed behind a cleverly disguised rock panel. The walls of the passage were covered in strange inscriptions and markings, unlike anything John had ever seen. It was neither Iconian nor human. "Where does this lead?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with apprehension. "Only one way to find out," John said, pushing Phoebe's chair towards the passage. As they descended into the darkness, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. A low rumble echoed through the mine, growing louder with each passing second. Suddenly, the passage collapsed, a torrent of rock and debris sealing off the entrance. John and Marcus were thrown to the ground, coughing and gasping for air. Phoebe watched in horror as the passage disappeared, leaving her alone on the other side of the newly formed rock wall. "John! Marcus!" She cried, her voice filled with despair. Her claws gripped at the stone, her frustration and fear palpable. Phoebe slammed her fists against the fallen rocks, a guttural cry tearing from her throat. Dust billowed around her, illuminated by the flickering beam of her helmet lamp. Each impact sent tremors through her paralyzed legs, a phantom pain that mirrored the agony in her heart. "John!" "Marcus!" she roared, her voice cracking. Her cybernetic arms strained, hydraulics whining, but the rocks remained stubbornly in place. They wouldn't budge. From behind the rockfall, a muffled voice. "Phoebe, we're here." It was John, his voice strained but steady. "Status report." Phoebe sagged against the rocks, relief washing over her, quickly followed by renewed panic. "I can't move them." "Too heavy, you're trapped." "We can see that," John replied dryly. "How's the air?" Marcus's voice, closer now, raspy. "Feels stuffy but breathable. Rocks seem pretty unstable though, might be able to shift some." Phoebe closed her eyes, focusing. Her Iconian senses, amplified by her implants, stretched out, probing the darkness in, eyeing the cave in. "There's a draft." Faint but there, on the other side of the collapse. "Like a ventilation shaft maybe, small." John grunted. "Small means smaller than me, great." He coughed, the sound echoing in the confined space. "All right, let's see if we can make that small passage a little bigger. Marcus, you got that pry bar." The next few minutes were a cacophony of scraping rock and grunts of exertion. Phoebe, helpless to assist, could only listen, her anxiety growing with each passing moment. Finally, a sliver of light pierced the darkness. "Got it," John exclaimed, his voice closer now. "Just enough to squeeze through, but this tunnel, Doesn't look stable. Stand back, Phoebe. John emerged, covered in dust, followed by Marcus, who looked even worse for wear. The tunnel beyond was narrow and twisting, the walls lined with jagged rocks that threatened to collapse at any moment. "That shaft you sensed," John said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Think you can fit?" Phoebe nodded grimly. "I'm smaller than you two, and more motivated." She turned and began to crawl into the narrow opening, her cybernetic limbs providing purchase on the uneven surface. The shaft was even tighter than she'd imagined. Her fur brushed against the cold stone, and the air grew thick and stale. As she moved deeper, she noticed strange markings etched into the rock symbols unlike anything she'd ever seen before. Not Iconian, not Crimson Hand. Something older. She reached the other side and emerged into a larger, though equally unstable, tunnel. "I'm through," she called back, "and I found something. Inscriptions, ancient maybe. A map." John and Marcus squeezed through the opening, joining her in the tunnel. As they moved forward, the inscriptions became more frequent, accompanied by increasingly sophisticated technology, strange devices that hummed with an unseen energy, manipulating gravity in subtle ways, flickering lights powered by an unknown source. "What is this place?" Marcus muttered, running a hand along a smooth, metallic surface. "Feels like something is manipulating the gravity around here," said John. "Like we're walking uphill, but we're not." "I used to be part of a demolition crew," Marcus said almost casually. "Before all this, I know how to collapse a tunnel or two, strategically, of course." Before John could respond, the tunnel ahead erupted in a hail of laser fire. Crimson Hand soldiers, their red armor glinting in the dim light, poured into the passage. "Ambush!" John yelled, diving for cover behind a fallen rock. The firefight was brutal and chaotic. The narrow confines of the tunnel offered little room to maneuver, and the air quickly filled with the acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone. John, armed with his scavenged rifle, fired in short, controlled bursts, using the environment to his advantage, creating makeshift traps with loose rocks and unstable supports. Phoebe, despite her paralysis, was a force to be reckoned with. Her cybernetic arms ripped chunks of rock from the walls, hurling them at the Crimson Hand soldiers with surprising accuracy. She focused her fire on the lead soldier, recognizing the lieutenant from their previous encounter. "You again!" she snarled, unleashing a barrage of laser fire that forced the lieutenant to duck for cover. Seeing an opportunity, Phoebe targeted a section of the tunnel roof weakened by previous explosions. With a focused burst of energy from her cybernetics, she triggered a collapse, burying several Crimson Hand soldiers under tons of rock and creating a temporary barrier between them and the remaining attackers. "Move!" she barked, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "That won't hold them for long." They scrambled through the tunnels, deeper into the mine, until they stumbled upon a hidden chamber. Inside, rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing the perfectly preserved body of a being unlike anything they had ever seen. Slender, graceful creatures with elongated skulls and shimmering, iridescent skin. In the center of the chamber, a holographic display flickered, revealing schematics of the device Phoebe needed, along with countless other technologies they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Suddenly, a klaxon blared and the chamber shook. Outside, the whine of engines grew louder, followed by the crackle of energy weapons. "Iconian patrol ship," John said grimly. "They're locking down the facility. They're scanning for us," Phoebe added, her ears twitching, trying to seal all the exits. John's eyes scanned the chamber, landing on the stasis pods. "Wait a minute. Those pods, they're shielded. We could use them as cover, but we'd need a power surge to activate them." "That's insane," Marcus said, shaking his head. "You'd overload the whole system." "Maybe," John replied, a glint in his eye. "But it's the only chance we've got. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Draw their fire, lead them away from here. Give us some time." Marcus stared at him for a moment, then nodded, a grim smile on his face. Always wanted to go out with a bang. While Marcus disappeared into the tunnels, John began working frantically, rerouting power cables and bypassing safety protocols. Phoebe watched him, her anxiety growing with each passing second. "Hurry, John," she urged. "They're getting closer." Finally, with a shower of sparks, John connected the last cable. The stasis pods hummed to life, bathing the chamber in an eerie blue glow. "All right," he said, grabbing Phoebe's arm. "Let's find that lab." They moved quickly through the tunnels, guided by the schematics from the stasis chamber, until they reached a large, circular room. In the center stood the device, a complex array of wires, crystals, and glowing energy conduits. But something was missing. A critical component was absent, leaving a gaping hole in the machine's intricate design. "Damn it," John cursed, pounding his fist against the console. "So close." Phoebe studied the schematics, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Wait, I think I know where it is. According to this, the missing component is located near the mine's central reactor." Suddenly, the device shuddered and a surge of energy pulsed through the room. Lights flickered and the air crackled with static electricity. Phoebe cried out, clutching her head. Her cybernetics spasmed, sending jolts of pain through her nervous system. "What's happening?" she gasped. Then a voice, cold and mechanical, echoed through the chamber. "System activation sequence initiated." The device glowed brighter, bathing the room in an intense white light. "Greetings, I am a remnant, a consciousness preserved within this machine." The voice paused, then continued, its tone shifting slightly. "I can restore your mobility, Iconian, but the process requires merging your consciousness with the device and the energy from the central reactor. The consequences are unpredictable." "Untouched," the AI finished, its voice echoing in the chamber. "However, it requires a merging process, integration of my core programming with your neural pathways, Phoebe. It is the only way to fully restore your nervous system and rebuild your spinal column." John's brow furrowed. He didn't like the sound of that. "Merging? What does that actually mean?" "You're talking about messing with her brain." He glared at the device, suspicion hardening his features. "What's your angle here? What do you get out of this?" The AI pulsed with a soft blue light. "My existence is tied to this facility. I am a remnant of a species long gone, one that sought to transcend physical limitations. They were attempting to achieve a form of digital immortality, transferring their consciousness into machines. But a disaster struck, a cascade failure during a planetary transfer. They were never able to complete the process for themselves. And you think you can complete it with Phoebe?" John challenged, stepping protectively in front of her chair. "I require the reactor to provide the necessary power for the consciousness transfer. Its energy signature is uniquely compatible with Iconian physiology," the AI said, its tone devoid of emotion, yet tinged with what John perceived as longing. "But be warned, using the reactor at full capacity will trigger a failsafe, a self-destruct mechanism designed to prevent this technology from falling into the wrong hands. It would vaporize the entire mine." Phoebe's ears flattened against her head, a low growl rumbling in her chest. "Destroy the mine? What about the others, the stasis pods?" She looked at John, her silver eyes clouded with conflict. The chance to walk again, to run, to fight. It was a temptation she hadn't dared to dream of, but at what cost? A crackle of static erupted from John's comm, followed by a distorted, panicked voice. John, can you hear me? It's Marcus. They got me, the Crimson Hand. They're making me tell them where the power source is." The transmission broke up, filled with static and pained grunts. Another burst of static, then Marcus's voice, strained but clear. "They know you have the device, I told them. I had to, but I warned them about the reactor, the failsafe. Tell them." The comm went dead. The AI's voice cut through the silence. "They are coming. The Crimson Hand will attempt to secure the reactor." A harsh, metallic voice echoed through the mine's comm system, overriding the AI. All Crimson Hand units converge on Sector Gamma 9. Secure the reactor. Eliminate all resistance. I want that power source now. Phoebe swore in Iconian, a string of guttural sounds filled with fury and frustration. We're out of time. Then we make do with what we have, John said, his eyes hardening with willpower. He turned to the AI. There has to be a way to use the reactor without triggering the failsafe. A bypass, a subroutine, something. The AI processed the request. There is a hidden control panel, concealed behind a reinforced access port. It allows for manual regulation of the reactor's output. However, it is heavily shielded and requires precise manipulation. John glanced at the mine schematics on a nearby console. Those Iconian patrol ships. They've been more active lately. I bet they're detecting the energy buildup from this thing. Phoebe snarled. I can divert their sensors, create a temporary disruption. It will buy us some time, but not much. They will not be easily fooled. There is another option, though one I hesitate to suggest, the AI intoned. To reduce the risk of a catastrophic surge, we could temporarily shut down the life support systems in the stasis pods, rerouting that power to stabilize the reactor. John recoiled. Shut down life support. You're talking about killing those people. It is a necessary sacrifice, John, Phoebe said, her voice surprisingly calm. Their lives for the chance to restore mine and to stop the Crimson Hand. They are already in stasis, John. They won't feel a thing. John's expression resolute, his gaze flickering between Phoebe and the dormant figures in the stasis pods. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. He remembered his family, lost to a war he never understood. He had sworn to protect life, not extinguish it, but Phoebe, she had become his family. With a heavy sigh, John stepped toward the control panel. His fingers hovered over the activation sequence. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He initiated the shutdown sequence. The pods flickered, their lights dimming as the life support systems powered down. The AI's voice resonated through the chamber. Commencing merging process. Stand by. A beam of energy erupted from the device, engulfing Phoebe in a blinding light. Her body arched, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Suddenly, the reinforced doors to the chamber buckled and exploded inward, showering the room with sparks and debris. Crimson Hand soldiers stormed in, weapons raised. Secure the reactor. Their leader bellowed, his voice a gravelly rasp. Take them alive. Plasma fire ripped through the air, tearing chunks out of the walls. One shot struck the control panel, sending a cascade of sparks and short-circuiting the system. The reactor hummed, then screamed, its energy output spiking wildly. Failsafe initiated. The AI shrieked, its voice infused with panic. Self-destruction sequence commencing, T-5 minutes. The AI, now partially integrated with Phoebe, thrashed in her chair. I cannot control it. The damage, it is too severe. John lunged for the control panel, ignoring the searing heat radiating from the overloaded circuits. He reached for the manual override, his fingers brushing against the damaged wires. A jolt of electricity surged through his body, throwing him back against the wall. His vision blurred, his muscles spasmed, and darkness threatened to consume him. Phoebe's eyes snapped open, glowing with an unnatural intensity. The AI's consciousness swirled within her, a torrent of information and power. She saw the reactor's core, the cascading energy, the imminent destruction. She saw John, lying motionless on the floor, his body convulsing. A choice crystallized in her mind, a decision born of desperation and love. Complete the merging, she commanded, her voice a composite of her own and the AI's. I must have full control. There is no other way. The merging. It was a kaleidoscope of agony and alien sensation. Iconian battle strategies flooded her mind, overlaid with schematics of the reactor, calculations of energy flow, and a lifetime of human memories that weren't hers. John's pain, sharp and insistent, lanced through the chaos, grounding her. A strangled cry escaped her throat, a sound both human and Iconian. Instinct, sharpened by the AI's processing power, took over. The closest Crimson Hand soldier, weapon raised, became a blur. Phoebe's hand, moving faster than she thought possible, snapped his wrist with a sickening crack, sending the rifle clattering to the metal floor. Another soldier lunged, but she sidestepped, using his momentum to send him crashing into his comrade. John. He lay still, too still. His body jerked spasmodically, a horrifying dance fueled by the electrical surge. Phoebe scrambled towards him, ignoring the renewed barrage of laser fire that scorched the air around her. He needed help now. Bolts slammed into the floor beside her, showering her with sparks and molten metal. They were relentless. She had to get them off her back. The AI, a cool voice in the back of her mind, offered a solution. Localized energy pulse. Reactor core resonance frequency. Minimal collateral damage. Phoebe didn't hesitate. Focusing her will, she channeled the AI's calculations, manipulating the reactor's energy field. A wave of invisible force erupted outwards, slamming into the Crimson Hand soldiers. They crumpled, paralyzed, their weapons falling silent. It wouldn't hold them for long. Emergency medical station. Sector Gamma 9. Coordinates transmitted. The AI's voice was insistent. Phoebe scooped John into her arms, surprised by his lightness, and stumbled towards the indicated location. The medical station was hidden behind a reinforced blast door, easily overlooked in the reactor's chaotic layout. Inside, banks of glowing screens displayed complex physiological data. Robotic arms, gleaming chrome and polished steel, hung suspended, waiting. This wasn't Crimson Hand tech. This was something far more advanced. Something human. Following the AI's instructions, Phoebe laid John on a bio bed. The robotic arms whirred to life, scanning him, injecting fluids, sealing wounds with focused energy beams. The AI guided her through the process, its knowledge precise and unwavering, stabilizing vital signs. Neural activity critical but recoverable. Reactor failsafe accelerating. T-7 minutes 30 seconds. The AI's warning cut through the tension. Time was running out. Even as the medical station worked to save John, the Crimson Hand soldiers were recovering. Their lieutenant, face contorted with rage, barked orders. Bypass the alien. Secure the control panel. I want that reactor online. The soldiers surged forward, ignoring their fallen comrades, their eyes fixed on the control panel across the room. They were willing to die to achieve their objective. Phoebe's muscles tensed. She couldn't be in two places at once. Save John or stop the reactor. She looked at John's pale face, at the robotic arms working tirelessly to keep him alive. Then she made her decision. AI, can you maintain life support? Affirmative. Minimal intervention required for 15 minutes. Then keep him alive, Phoebe growled, her voice filled with Iconian willpower. I'm going to stop them. Marcus winced as the Crimson Hand leader tightened his grip on his arm. You're lying, old man, the leader snarled, his breath reeking of cheap synth booze. You know what that reactor can do. Tell me, Marcus feigned confusion. I told you it's just a power source for the mining operation. The leader gestured towards a line of prisoners huddled against the wall. They say different. They say you were working on something. Bigger, more dangerous. He pointed a plasma pistol at the nearest prisoner, a young woman with wide, terrified eyes. Tell me what I want to know or she dies. Marcus hesitated. He couldn't condemn these people to death. All right, he sighed. It's capable of generating a massive energy discharge, a focused blast, enough to level a city. The leader's eyes gleamed with avarice. A weapon, I knew it. Back in the reactor chamber, Phoebe moved like a whirlwind. The AI amplified her Iconian reflexes, turning her into a lethal fighting machine. She blocked a plasma blast with her bare hand, the energy dissipating harmlessly against her reinforced skin. She disarmed another soldier with a swift kick to the groin, then used his own weapon to incapacitate two more. But the lieutenant was too close. He reached the control panel, his fingers flying across the console. A holographic display flickered to life, showing the reactor's core destabilizing. "Failsafe override initiated," he hissed. "Crimson hand control established." Phoebe realized his intention wasn't just to prevent the reactor's destruction. He wanted to weaponize it. The AI offered a solution: energy feedback loop. Disrupt override sequence. High probability of core instability. "Do it," Phoebe commanded. Focusing her will, she channeled the AI's instructions, overloading the lieutenant's override sequence. A surge of energy erupted from the control panel, throwing him backwards, unconscious. The reactor core pulsed with unstable energy. Alarms blared. Warning lights flashed. Failsafe countdown accelerated. T-5 minutes. Structural integrity compromised. Probability of catastrophic failure 99%. Phoebe stared at John, still unconscious on the bio bed. She couldn't save the mine, she couldn't save everyone, but maybe she could save him. "AI, can we use the reactor's energy to create a portal, a short jump? Somewhere safe, probability of success, 62%. Portal integrity cannot be guaranteed. Destination, unknown. Risk of complete disintegration, high. We have no choice," Phoebe said, her voice barely a whisper. "Prepare the portal." As the AI began the calculations, Phoebe noticed something else. The stasis pods, the ones containing the alien creatures, were starting to melt. The structural instability was spreading. Another choice. Another impossible decision. The sun beat down on John's back as he wrestled with a stubborn irrigation pipe, the metal hot enough to blister skin. Dust devils danced across the parched fields, a constant reminder of the planet's unforgiving climate. He cursed under his breath, sweat stinging his eyes. "Need a hand, old man," a gruff voice called out. John glanced over to see Phoebe, her massive, wolf-like form silhouetted against the horizon. She was perched on a modified harvester seat that John had rigged up for her, a network of pulleys and levers allowing her to control a small cultivator with her powerful forelimbs. The Iconian warrior, paralyzed from the waist down, was now a farmer of sorts. "Just about got it," John grunted, finally yanking the pipe free. "Though I wouldn't say no to a little encouragement." Phoebe chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. "Encouragement from a cripple, what good am I?" Her voice held a familiar edge of self-deprecation. John straightened up, wiping his brow with a grimy rag. "Don't talk like that, Phoebe. You're pulling your weight and then some. Besides," he added with a wink, "you're the only one around here who can scare off the buzzards just by glaring at them." Phoebe snorted, but a hint of a smile played around her muzzle. She missed the thrill of battle, the camaraderie of her pack, the feeling of running across the plains. Being confined to this contraption, dependent on a human, chafed at her pride. But she couldn't deny the strange sense of peace she found on the farm, the quiet satisfaction of coaxing life from the barren soil. And despite her initial distrust, she had begun to respect, even care for the stubborn, compassionate human who had saved her life. Later that evening, as they ate a meager meal of synthesized protein and locally grown tubers, John brought up the subject that had been weighing on his mind. "I was talking to a trader passing through," he said, carefully avoiding Phoebe's gaze. "He mentioned something about advanced medical tech, said there might be a way to fix your legs." Phoebe's ears perked up. She hadn't spoken of her lost mobility, but John knew how much it haunted her. "Fix them? How?" He said there was a human colony lost a long time ago. Supposedly they had technology we can only dream of now. Cybernetics, genetic engineering, the works. Phoebe's eyes narrowed. A lost colony sounds like a fairy tale. "Maybe," John conceded. "But what if it's not? What if there's a chance, even a small one, that we could get you back on your feet?" A flicker of hope ignited in Phoebe's eyes, quickly masked by skepticism. "And where would we even begin to look? This planet is a graveyard." The trader mentioned some coordinates, old survey data, enough to give us a starting point. It'd be a long shot, a dangerous one, but... John trailed off, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Phoebe studied him, her expression unreadable. She saw the dedication in his eyes, the unwavering belief in the impossible. It was the same look he had when he first found her, broken and bleeding on the battlefield. It was the look of a man who refused to give up, even when all hope seemed lost. "And what about the farm?" she asked, her voice softer now. "What about your livelihood?" John shrugged. "The farm will be here when we get back. Besides," he added with a grin, "it's not like I can handle those buzzards on my own." A slow smile spread across Phoebe's face. "So you're saying you need me?" "Desperately," John said, his eyes meeting hers. "Besides, if this colony exists and they have the tech, who knows what else they might have? Medicine, tools, knowledge that could help everyone on this planet." Phoebe considered his words, the fire of her warrior spirit rekindling within her. The farm was a haven, a place of peace. But the call of adventure, the promise of restoring her strength, was too strong to resist. "All right, old man," she said, her voice firm. "Let's find your lost colony." The hum of the modified engine vibrated through John's bones. He tightened a bolt on the repurposed harvester, the metallic tang of lubricant filling the air. The vehicle, once used for tilling fields of synth wheat, now sported reinforced plating, scavenged from a downed Iconian transport, and a jury-rigged suspension system that looked like it might fall apart at any moment. Phoebe watched him from her platform welded onto the back, her golden eyes narrowed. "That contraption, you are certain it will not disintegrate after a few kilometers?" Her voice, still raspy from her injuries, held a characteristic note of skepticism. John wiped grease from his brow with the back of his hand. "Certain? No. Hopeful? Absolutely. Besides," he added with a grin, "walking isn't exactly an option for you right now, is it?" A low growl rumbled in Phoebe's chest, but she didn't retort. The truth stung. Hours later, the crimson dust swirled on the horizon, resolving into a cluster of vehicles hulking, sand-scarred machines adorned with tattered banners and scavenged weaponry. The nomadic traders. John killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the alien wind whistling across the plains. "Stay sharp," he muttered, grabbing his rifle. The traders approached cautiously, their eyes, weathered and wary, scanned John and Phoebe's vehicle. Their leader, a gaunt woman with a cybernetic eye that glinted in the harsh sunlight, stepped forward. "You seek passage or trade?" "Trade," John replied, his voice steady. "Information, specifically the location of a precursor vault, rumored to be connected to the lost colony." The woman's good eye narrowed. "The lost colony is a myth, a ghost story to scare children." "Some say otherwise," John countered, nodding towards the harvester. "I'm willing to offer this vehicle's core farming technology, nutrient synthesis, automated irrigation in exchange for a map, a reliable map." A tense silence hung in the air. The woman conferred with her companions in rapid clicks and whistles. Finally, she turned back to John. "We have fragments, old charts, they may lead to something, but the colony, it was lost for a reason." John traded the core, a palm-sized device humming with complex algorithms, for a tattered, multi-layered map etched onto treated hide. Back in the relative safety of their own vehicle, Phoebe examined the map with a critical eye. "This is dubious," she declared, tracing a claw along a faded line. "The markings are inconsistent, the cartography is primitive. It's a lead, Phoebe, the only one we've got. A lead into an ambush, more likely. These traders are scavengers, John. They would sell their own offspring for a drop of fuel." "I know the risks," John snapped, his patience fraying. "But I have to try, don't I? Or do you prefer to rot here?" Her golden eyes flashed. "Do not speak to me of rotting. I am a warrior, not some." She cut herself off, struggling to contain her anger. "You humans, you are so easily manipulated by hope." John sighed, rubbing his temples. "And you Iconians are so consumed by distrust that you miss the opportunities right in front of you." The argument hung heavy in the air as they rumbled towards the coordinates on the map. Then, without warning, the ground erupted in a cloud of dust and the screech of tearing metal. Scavengers. John slammed on the brakes, throwing the vehicle into a violent skid. Laser fire ripped through the air, tearing chunks from the reinforced plating. Phoebe, despite her paralysis, roared a command, her upper body twisting with surprising strength as she returned fire with a scavenged energy weapon. Traps! John yelled, scrambling to activate the defensive measures he'd rigged around the vehicle. A series of sonic emitters shrieked, disorienting the attackers, followed by a cloud of superheated steam that scalded their exposed skin. The scavengers retreated momentarily, but their attack had taken its toll. The vehicle's left wheel was buckled, its suspension groaning under the strain. "We can't outrun them like this," John said grimly, assessing the damage. "The map," Phoebe said, her voice tight with pain. "The vault is close, we proceed on foot." The vault, when they finally reached it, was not the gleaming city of human dreams John had envisioned. It was a squat, obsidian structure half buried in the sand, its surface etched with alien glyphs that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "Not human," John muttered, his hand resting on his rifle. Phoebe examined the structure with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Precursor. Ancient. This technology. It predates even the Iconian Empire. They breached the vault's entrance, the heavy door groaning open to reveal a labyrinthine complex of corridors and chambers. Inside, the air hummed with latent energy, and the walls were lined with rows of data consoles flickering with cryptic symbols. John activated a console, the screen resolving into a series of fragmented images and text. Records, experiments, cybernetics. He paused, his eyes widening. They were trying to enhance themselves, merge with machines. The lost colony. They sought immortality. Phoebe asked, her voice filled with a hint of disgust. Suddenly, a klaxon blared, bathing the complex in red light. Intruders detected. Security lockdown initiated. "We've been spotted," John said, grabbing Phoebe. "Time to go." They sprinted through the corridors, the facility's automated defenses snapping to life. Laser grids crisscrossed their path, and robotic sentinels emerged from hidden alcoves, their weapons trained on the intruders. "Left," Phoebe barked, her tactical mind instantly analyzing the facility's layout. "Maintenance tunnel. Bypass the main security checkpoint." John followed her instructions, navigating the labyrinthine complex with surprising agility. Their teamwork was seamless, a blend of human ingenuity and Iconian tactical prowess. As they rounded a corner, Phoebe grunted in surprise. "Wait, here." She reached out with a hesitant claw, touching a small panel embedded in the wall. Her eyes widened. I feel something, a tingling, in my leg." John stared at her in disbelief. "What?" "There," Phoebe pointed with her snout to the panel. "Cybernetic interface, damaged but functional." They stumbled upon a hidden lab filled with gleaming chrome and humming machinery. In the center of the room stood a large, cylindrical device, its purpose unclear. "A prototype," John breathed, examining the device's schematics. "Designed to restore mobility. But it requires a power source unlike anything I've ever seen, something called Etherium." Before they could delve deeper, a voice echoed through the lab. "Intruders, your curiosity ends here." A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, imposing man in a pristine white uniform, his face etched with lines of weariness and persistence. He clutched an energy pistol in his hand. "I am Security Chief Valerius," he announced, his voice resonating with authority. "And I know why you're here. You seek the secrets of the lost colony." "Who were they?" John asked, his rifle raised. "My ancestors," Valerius replied, his eyes hardening. "And their legacy is not to be plundered by scavengers and grave robbers." He paused, his gaze softening slightly. "But perhaps we can come to an understanding. I can tell you where to find Etherium. In exchange, you help me reactivate this facility's defense systems. We are under attack." "Attack?" Phoebe asked, her ears twitching. "A hostile alien faction. They seek to steal the colony's technology. If they succeed, this entire planet will be at risk." John lowered his rifle slightly, weighing the risks. "What's in it for you?" "Survival," Valerius replied simply, "and the preservation of my ancestors' work." John looked at Phoebe, his expression questioning. The potential for a cure was too great to ignore. "All right," he said, "we'll help you." As they worked to reactivate the defense systems, a cacophony of alarms filled the facility. The walls shook as explosions echoed through the corridors. "They're breaching the perimeter," Valerius shouted, his voice strained. "We need to activate the main power core." John and Phoebe followed him to a central control room where a massive energy conduit pulsed with terrifying power. Valerius initiated the activation sequence, the facility groaning under the strain. Suddenly, the conduit overloaded, showering the room in sparks. The facility lurched violently and a computerized voice announced, "Self-destruct sequence initiated, T-5 minutes." "What have you done?" John yelled, grabbing Valerius by the collar. "It's a failsafe," Valerius gasped, clutching his chest. "Designed to prevent the technology from falling into the wrong hands." He coughed, blood trickling from his lips. "Etherium. It's on Xylo's coordinates, are in my datapad." Valerius slumped to the floor, his eyes glazing over. The facility shuddered again, the self-destruct timer ticking relentlessly. "We have to go," John shouted, grabbing Phoebe. "What about him?" Phoebe asked, glancing at Valerius's body. "He's gone. We can't save him, and we can't save this place. But maybe we can still save you." They raced through the collapsing facility, dodging falling debris and energy surges. Just as the self-destruct timer reached 0, they burst out of the vault's entrance, the ground erupting behind them in a blinding flash of light. They stumbled away from the wreckage, coughing and gasping for air. The vault was gone, reduced to a smoking crater. John pulled Valerius's datapad from his pocket, activating the screen. The coordinates for Xylos shimmered into view. They were stranded without a vehicle on a hostile planet, but they had a destination, and a glimmer of hope. The hunt for Etherium had begun. The alarm screamed, a high-pitched whine that cut through the groaning metal. John wrestled with the controls, but the damaged thrusters were useless. "Brace yourself," he yelled, his voice tight with fear. The ground rushed up to meet them, a blur of jagged rocks and sickly green vegetation. Then blackness. John gasped, his lungs burning. He coughed, hacking up a mouthful of acrid air. The smell of ozone and burnt metal filled his nostrils. He pushed himself up, ignoring the throbbing pain in his head. "Phoebe," he croaked, his voice hoarse. He scrambled towards her, his heart pounding in his chest. She was slumped in her seat, her eyes closed. "Phoebe, wake up." Her eyes fluttered open and she groaned. What happened?" she rasped, her voice weak. "We crashed," John said grimly. "Are you hurt?" "My legs." She began, then winced. The feeling is worse." John quickly assessed the damage. The ship was a wreck, but the emergency supplies were intact. More importantly, Phoebe was alive. He pulled her free from the wreckage, supporting her weight. The air was thick with a strange, metallic tang. "We need to get out of here," he said, his eyes scanning the alien landscape. "The atmosphere's toxic." He ripped apart a section of the ship's hull, salvaging what he could. "This should work," he muttered, stuffing layers of filtration cloth into a makeshift mask. He fashioned one for Phoebe as well. "It's not perfect, but it'll buy us some time." The mask chafed against his skin, and the filtered air tasted like ash, but it was better than nothing. As they moved away from the crash site, Phoebe gripped his arm, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "John, I feel something." She squeezed her eyes shut, her face contorted in pain. "In my legs, a burning, a tingling." "The cybernetics?" John asked, his voice filled with concern. "It's erratic," she said, her voice strained. "Like sparks, but painful." They pressed on, the toxic air stinging their lungs. The landscape was alien and hostile, a twisted mockery of life. Strange, gnarled trees clawed at the sky, their branches dripping with a viscous, luminescent sap. A low, guttural growl echoed through the desolate landscape. Phoebe stiffened. "Something's out there," she whispered, her eyes narrowed. "Close." A creature emerged from the shadows, its body a grotesque fusion of flesh and metal. Its skin was covered in pulsating boils, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent light. It snarled, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Stay behind me," John said, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon. He had nothing. "We need to be quiet. Hopefully it will leave us alone." The creature shuffled closer, its movements jerky and unpredictable. Phoebe's eyes glowed with a predatory intensity, and she scanned the area. "There, cave." She pointed with her chin to a dark opening in a nearby rock face. "If we're quiet, we can hide." They crept towards the cave, their movements slow and deliberate. The creature's guttural growls grew louder closer. John felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. The stench of rot and decay was almost unbearable. They slipped into the cave, the darkness swallowing them whole. The air inside was damp and heavy, thick with the smell of mildew and something else, something ancient and unknown. Bioluminescent fungi clung to the walls, casting an eerie green glow. "We're not alone," Phoebe whispered, her voice barely audible. From the depths of the cave, a figure emerged. It was humanoid, but its skin was pale and gaunt, its eyes sunken and hollow. It was dressed in rags, and its movements were hesitant and wary. More figures followed, their faces etched with suspicion and fear. An older woman stepped forward, her face weathered and lined. She carried herself with a quiet authority. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice raspy but firm. "What do you want?" Her eyes fell on Phoebe's cybernetic limbs. "That technology." Her voice was tinged with curiosity. "You carry the mark of the lost colony." "Lost colony?" John asked, his brow furrowed. The woman nodded. "I am Alara," she said, "leader of this tribe. And you have stumbled upon a place best left forgotten." Alara led them deeper into the cave, to a large cavern bathed in an otherworldly glow. At its center stood a geothermal vent, pulsing with raw energy. The air crackled with an unseen force. The tribesmen stood around the vent, chanting in a low, rhythmic drone. "This is the life giver," Alara said, her voice filled with reverence. "It sustains us, but it also demands respect." Phoebe's cybernetics thrummed with energy. "The radiation, it's affecting me." "The radiation will kill you," Alara said, her voice filled with warning. "It only helps those who have been cybernetically enhanced by lost colony tech." "Then it can help me walk again," Phoebe said, her voice filled with a desperate hope. "It is not a gift," Alara said, her eyes filled with concern. "It is a curse. It brought ruin to our ancestors." "I don't care," Phoebe said, her voice defiant. "I need it." "Phoebe, don't," John said, his voice pleading. "John, I need this," she said, her voice firm. "I have to try." John looked at Phoebe, his heart aching. He saw the hope in her eyes, the desperate longing to be whole again. He couldn't deny her that. "Then we'll do it together," he said, his voice filled with purpose. Alara shook her head. "You do not understand the danger," she said. "The life giver demands a sacrifice. It will test you. It will break you." "Then we'll face it together," John said, his voice unwavering. "Whatever it takes." Alara studied John, her eyes searching. "Very well," she said. "If you are so determined, you must prove your worthiness. You must complete the ritual of the life giver." The ritual was a grueling test of strength, agility, and intelligence. John faced treacherous climbs, navigated laser grids, and solved ancient riddles. The tribe members watched him with suspicion and hostility, their eyes filled with resentment. As John struggled through the trials, Phoebe watched from the sidelines, her heart pounding with anxiety. She saw the pain and exhaustion in his face, but she also saw his unwavering drive. She knew she couldn't let him do this alone. Against Alara's warning, Phoebe slipped away from the village and made her way to the trial grounds. She used her combat skills and tactical knowledge to help John overcome the obstacles, disabling traps and providing him with crucial information. The tribesmen muttered amongst themselves, their resentment growing with each passing moment. "She is cursed," one of them whispered. "The cybernetics have corrupted her." Despite the challenges, John persevered. He drew on his farming skills, his knowledge of the land, and his unwavering tenacity to overcome each obstacle. Finally, he reached the end of the ritual, exhausted but triumphant. Ilara approached him, her eyes filled with a newfound respect. "You have proven yourself worthy," she said. "You have earned the right to approach the life-giver." She led him to a heavily shielded chamber where the geothermal vent pulsed with an almost unbearable intensity. "The lost colony used a device to safely extract the energy," she said, "but it was lost during the sundering." Suddenly, Phoebe gasped. A surge of energy coursed through her body, and she cried out in pain. She felt a tingling sensation in her legs, stronger than anything she had ever experienced. I can feel them," she gasped. "I can feel my legs." A vision flooded her mind, a chaotic scene of destruction and despair. She saw the lost colony in its final moments, their technology spiraling out of control, their arrogance leading to their downfall. The sundering. She whispered, her voice filled with horror. It was their own fault. John looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. "Phoebe, what's happening?" Before she could answer, a monstrous creature burst from the depths of the cavern, its body twisted and mutated by the radiation. It roared, its voice shaking the very foundations of the cave. The tribesmen scattered in terror, their faces etched with fear. "The life-giver is angry," one of them cried. "We have angered the life-giver." John grabbed a makeshift spear, his eyes narrowed. "We have to protect them," he said. "We have to protect everyone." Phoebe, still struggling with the surge of energy in her legs, managed to stand, her eyes blazing with purpose. "Then let's fight," she said. Together they faced the monstrous creature, their courage and dedication shining brightly in the face of overwhelming odds. They fought as one, a human farmer and an alien warrior, bound together by a bond of love and loyalty. After an arduous and taxing battle, they finally managed to defeat the creature, its body collapsing in a heap of smoking flesh. The tribesmen emerged from their hiding places, their faces filled with awe and gratitude. Ilara approached them, her eyes filled with respect. "You have saved us," she said. "You have proven that even a curse can be turned into a blessing." She smiled sadly, then turned away. "The sundering happened because we became too dependent on the technology, too little on each other." She then pulled out a weathered map, a relic from the lost colony. "This map leads to an underground ruin," she said. "It is said to contain the device that can control the life-giver's energy, but be warned. It is also said to be the gateway to another world." John adjusted the lamp strapped to his forehead, its beam cutting through the oppressive gloom. The entrance to the underground ruin gaped before them, a maw leading into the unknown. They stepped inside, and the air immediately grew heavy, thick with the cloying scent of something akin to overripe fruit, but with a metallic undertone that made John's nose wrinkle. The light revealed a cavern filled with alien flora unlike anything he'd ever seen. Bioluminescent fungi pulsed with an eerie green light, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Vines with razor-sharp thorns snaked across the floor, retracting slightly as the light touched them, only to lash out again when the beam moved on. Towering plants with fleshy, pulsating leaves swayed gently, their surfaces shimmering with an oily sheen. Phoebe shivered beside him, her ears twitching. "This place, it feels wrong." They moved cautiously deeper into the ruin, the strange flora reacting to their presence. As the light played across the plants, they shifted colors, morphing from vibrant greens and blues to sickly yellows and browns, creating a disorienting kaleidoscope of light and shadow. Suddenly, a holographic projection flickered to life, bathing the cavern in a pale blue glow. A gaunt figure in a lab coat materialized before them, its image wavering and distorted. Geothermal vent, remarkable energy source, potential for paralysis reversal. The figure stammered, its voice crackling with static. However, highly unstable, extraction process. Extreme caution. The hologram dissolved, replaced by another and then another, each detailing different aspects of the geothermal vent's properties and potential. They were trying to heal paralysis, John murmured, his eyes scanning the projections. But it was dangerous. How dangerous? Phoebe asked, her voice tight. Another hologram appeared, this one showing a complex schematic of the vent's core. Energy output, exponentially increases, cascade effect, containment failure, catastrophic consequences. Precise calibration, John muttered, reading the accompanying text. They needed to be perfect. As they delved deeper, the ruins' defenses stirred. Laser grids flickered into existence, blocking their path. Automated turrets emerged from the walls, their barrels trained on them. Phoebe growled, her hand instinctively reaching for her pulse rifle. "Wait," John said, holding up a hand. He knelt down, examining a control panel embedded in the wall. "Basic electronics," he muttered. "Give me a minute." Using his multi-tool, he bypassed the security protocols, deactivating the laser grids and disabling the turrets. "How did you know how to do that?" Phoebe asked, her eyes narrowed. "Farming equipment," John shrugged. "It's all just wires and circuits." Suddenly, Phoebe gasped, clutching her head. Images flashed across her face, a towering city bathed in golden light, figures in white coats arguing, a massive explosion that ripped the sky apart. "What is it?" John asked, his voice filled with concern. "The sundering," she whispered, her voice trembling. I saw it, fragments." They continued on, and the ruin grew darker, more twisted. They entered a hidden laboratory, and the sight that greeted them made John's stomach churn. Vats filled with grotesque creatures, mutated humans and animals, their bodies warped and distorted beyond recognition. Failed experiments, discarded and forgotten. What happened here?" John whispered, his voice filled with horror. Phoebe shook her head, her eyes wide with revulsion. They were playing God. In the corner of the lab they found a journal. Its pages were filled with the frantic scribblings of a scientist, detailing his obsession with transferring his consciousness into a machine. Transcend mortality, achieve immortality, become one with the machine. John read aloud, his voice filled with disbelief. He wanted to live forever. Suddenly, a guttural growl echoed through the ruin. They turned to see a group of figures emerging from the shadows. They were Iconians, but twisted and mutated, their bodies contorted by radiation. Cybernetic implants were crudely grafted onto their flesh, pulsing with an eerie green light. "Trespassers," one of them snarled, its voice raspy and distorted. "You will not interfere with our harvest." "Harvest?" John asked, confused. "The vent's energy," the mutated Iconian replied. "It will make us strong." John noticed that some of the Iconians were controlling the machines, using them to attack. "They've transferred their minds," he realized. Like the scientist. Phoebe's cybernetics began to hum, resonating with the machines. She closed her eyes, concentrating. I can feel them," she said, her voice strained. "I can interface with them." The battle erupted. John fought with his rifle, taking down the mutated Iconians with precise shots. Phoebe, using her newfound connection to the machines, turned them against their masters, disrupting their control and sowing chaos among their ranks. In the chaos, they were separated. John found himself facing the leader of the tribe, a hulking figure with glowing green eyes. The leader lunged, and John barely managed to dodge the blow. "You cannot stop us," the leader roared. "We will become gods." Meanwhile, Phoebe struggled to maintain control of the machines, her mind turning from the influx of information. She managed to turn one of the turrets against the tribe, but the effort drained her. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The ruin was collapsing. "John!" Phoebe cried out. A section of the ceiling gave way, burying John under a pile of rubble. Phoebe watched in horror as the dust settled, revealing a scene of devastation. "No!" she screamed, her voice filled with anguish. Then she saw a device embedded in the wall, pulsing with energy. The device that extracted energy from the geothermal vent. Tears streamed down Phoebe's face. "John, gone. A wave of rage washed over her, her body trembling, and with a guttural cry she screamed, "John!" The device responded, bathing the room in a blinding light. Suddenly, John was gone. Phoebe stared in disbelief at the empty space where he had been. Then, a swirling portal of energy opened nearby, and she knew with a certainty that defied logic that he was on the other side. Without hesitation, Phoebe propelled her chair toward the portal and plunged through. John gasped, his lungs burning as he hit the ground. He scrambled to his feet, coughing and choking. The air was thin, acrid, and tasted like burning metal. He looked around, his eyes widening in disbelief. He was in a barren wasteland, a desolate landscape of twisted rock formations and choking dust. The sky was a sickly yellow, and the sun hung like a malevolent eye in the sky. The mutated Iconians could breathe here, though. It was clear they had adapted their bodies. This wasn't just another location, it was something else entirely. A different dimension, an alternate reality, the root of the sundering. Before he could fully process the situation, a figure materialized before him, radiating power. It was a being composed of pure energy, its form shifting and swirling like a living flame. "Intruders," the energy being boomed, its voice echoing through the wasteland. "You have trespassed in my domain." "Who are you?" John asked, his voice trembling. "I am the Guardian," the energy being replied, "and you have awakened me from my slumber." "We didn't mean to," John said, trying to reason with the being. "We were just looking for a way to cure Phoebe's paralysis." "The lost colony sought to weaponize the dimensional energy," the Guardian roared, ignoring John's pleas. "They caused the sundering, and now you seek to repeat their mistakes." The energy being lunged, its form crackling with power. Phoebe, who had just emerged from the portal, saw the attack and threw herself in front of John, her cybernetic implant glowing with an intense blue light. The energy being paused, its form flickering. Phoebe's actions, fueled by her bond with John, had triggered something within it, a surge of energy that seemed to incapacitate it. The energy being started to fade. But now, John and Phoebe were stranded in a dangerous new dimension, with no idea how to get back home. Phoebe roared, a sound that resonated not with anger, but with a fierce protectiveness. Blue energy surged from the cybernetics grafted to her spine, coalescing into a shimmering shield that deflected the energy being's chaotic discharges. The air crackled, ozone stinging John's nostrils, but Phoebe stood firm, a bulwark against the storm. The energy being pulsed, its form wavering, surprised by Phoebe's defiance. A tendril of light reached out, tentatively probing the energy surrounding her cybernetics, and paused. A flicker of recognition. It sensed the purity of intent, the unwavering desire to protect, a quality utterly absent in the cold calculations of the lost colony. John, his side throbbing with a dull ache from the energy being's earlier attack, pushed himself to his feet. "Phoebe," he rasped, his voice strained, "don't fight it, try to connect, show it what we want to do." Phoebe hesitated, her mandibles clicking softly. The warrior instinct screamed for battle, for dominance, but John's words echoed in her mind: compassion, understanding, connection. With a visible effort, she lowered her guard, focusing her will. She reached out, not with a weapon, but with her consciousness, extending it towards the swirling chaos of the energy being. The connection slammed into her like a physical blow. Pain, raw and untamed, flooded her senses. Fear, a primal terror that transcended species, clawed at her mind. She saw fragmented images, the sundering, not as a deliberate act of destruction, but as a catastrophic accident, a tearing of the fabric of reality that had shattered not only the dimensions but also the energy being's very essence. "It's broken," Phoebe gasped, staggering back, her cybernetics sparking. "Its mind. It's been torn apart." John, understanding dawning in his eyes, hobbled towards the geothermal vent, its heat radiating against his skin. "It needs energy," he said, his voice gaining strength. "Life energy. The same energy that fuels this dimension. I can reroute some of the flow." He began manipulating the makeshift controls he'd rigged, diverting a portion of the geothermal power towards the energy being. The air shimmered, the ground vibrated, and a palpable sense of anticipation filled the desolate landscape. Phoebe, bracing herself against the influx of raw power, focused her will. The geothermal energy surged through her cybernetics, amplifying their healing capabilities. She channeled it not as a weapon but as a balm, a soothing wave of restorative energy directed towards the fractured consciousness of the energy being. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to mend the broken pieces. The chaotic energy subsided, replaced by a gentle hum. The energy being's form stabilized, its swirling colors softening into a harmonious blend. And then, a miracle. A patch of the barren wasteland directly beneath the energy being erupted in a riot of color. Tiny, alien flowers bloomed, their petals shimmering with bioluminescence. A single hardy plant, long extinct on this world, unfurled its leaves, reaching for the weak sunlight. The dimension held its breath, revealing its potential for growth, for life, for hope. As the energy being healed, it shared a vision, a glimpse into the final days of the lost colony. Not a triumphant conquest, but a desperate struggle. Scientists, their faces etched with exhaustion and despair, frantically working to contain the damage, to heal the very dimension they had wounded. Some, a small faction, had even been trying to heal the energy being, recognizing it as the key to restoring balance. The vision clarified the truth. The sundering wasn't a calculated act of malice, but a tragic conflict. A division between those who sought to weaponize the geothermal energy for interdimensional conquest, and those who desperately tried to harness it for healing and understanding. The weaponizers had won, but their victory had been Pyrrhic, leading to the destruction of their colony and the fracturing of the dimensions. John looked at Phoebe, his eyes filled with a newfound grit. "We can't make the same mistake," he said, his voice firm. "We have to use this energy for healing, for understanding, not for war." Phoebe nodded, her gaze unwavering. "We will honor the intentions of those who sought to heal," she vowed. "We will become the bridge they could not build." The energy being, now fully healed, pulsed with gratitude. It extended a tendril of pure energy towards them, bathing them in its warm glow. Knowledge flooded their minds, blueprints of ancient technology, long lost to time, technology that could stabilize dimensional travel, technology that could prevent another sundering. They returned to their world, transformed by their experience. John, using his farming skills and his innate understanding of energy systems, established a sanctuary in the shadow of the geothermal vents. He diverted the energy, not to power weapons, but to heal the sick, to revitalize the land, to create a stable dimensional gateway. Phoebe, her cybernetics now resonating with the energy being's essence, became a beacon, a conduit between species and dimensions. She facilitated peaceful exchange, sharing knowledge, offering healing, fostering understanding. Her presence, once a symbol of loss and trauma, became a testament to resilience and the power of connection. John, no longer just a farmer struggling to survive, but a protector of worlds, stood beside Phoebe, his hand resting on her armored shoulder. He watched as the dimensions began to heal, as new alliances were forged, as hope blossomed in the most unexpected places. He was still a farmer at heart, tending to the needs of others, nurturing growth, but now